Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon. We're gonna start the program. First, I want to thank everybody for making this possible. I think it's very important for the community of Westchester to come together and discuss how policies, procedures, legislation affect the communities of color, the black communities, the poor communities throughout Westchester County. I'm very humble at the crowd. I am very humble at the crowd. I think this is something very, very important we need to talk about. I also want everybody to go on the Westchester Black Political Conference website, and under issues, there's a link to the 1992 African American Advisory Board report to then County Executive Andrew O'Rourke. And it speaks on a lot of issues. And what is surprising and not surprising that we're dealing with the same issues today that black people were dealing in 1992. I recently served on County Exec George Lattimore's transition team, the Subcommittee Criminal Justice. And our recommendations, we did the recommendations, but when I look back at the recommendations of the 1992 report, they were basically the same. So even though we came somewhere, we really didn't go anywhere. And for Westchester County to be one of the richest counties, it is still a tale of two counties. It is still a segregated county. And these are issues we need to talk about open, not in the bar room, not in the barbershops. You know, we can talk about it there, but we need to talk about it as a community. So I thank you again. But I would like to open up with a word of prayer from Reverend Norman, because I believe faith makes everything work. But you got to have action after that faith. So Reverend Norman.
Good afternoon. I pastor a church in Yonkers called Solid Rock Christian Center. It's a non-denominational church. So I'm here, and I'm not here to offend anyone, but I don't apologize for my faith in Jesus Christ. And so I believe when you ask someone to come and do an invocation, you're asking them to invoke the presence of God, whether it's Adonai, Yeshua HaMashiach. I'm asking him to come in and to bless this meeting. You heard Damon talk about the referencing back to things that were going back 20, 30 years ago that are still going on today. We don't want to be doing the same old, same old. That's crazy. And so if you want to make a change, I believe we need God in it. Many are the plans in the heart of a man, but the wisdom of God is what's going to establish. That's what we want. We want God's wisdom. Not only his wisdom, but his understanding. So when all is said and done, the concepts that come out of here are eternal, have an eternal perspective. In other words, we're looking to change the future of our generations and generations to come. We're not looking just to talk about it. We're looking for concepts that is going to affect the 5 sectors of society. That's family, that's education, religion, government, and business. We want to impact and make a difference. And if we're going to do it, we're going to need a decorum of love, unity, that's not going to divide us, but it's going to help us to truly make an eternal difference. Are you with me? Let's bow our hearts. Heavenly Father, as we come before you, we know that we can do nothing in our own strength. Our reliance is on you. We need your wisdom today as we discuss issues. I'm asking that your wisdom will come forth. And as it comes forth, Lord, that it will allow us to move and to make a change, to transform this world that we live in, these kingdoms that impact us. We want to make a difference. We ask you to help us today. Each and every one that's here. We need not old thinking, not stinking thinking, but we need individuals who are going to think outside the box and who are willing to lay down their lives to make a change. And so I pray, God, for your wisdom today. And each one who speaks, may concepts come out of here that will transform the systems of this world that we live in. And we ask all these things in Jesus Christ's name. Amen.
Amen.
We like to thank WESPAC for allowing us to use their facility. This was the first place we thought to come because they have been working in the community throughout Westchester for as long as I know. And I'd like to bring up Natasha Williams, a board member of WESPAC, to welcome everybody and to let people know what WESPAC is doing.
Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon, everybody. This is exciting. Westchester's first Black Political Conference. My name is Latifah Williams. I am a board member here at WESPAC, so welcome to WESPAC. Just want to greet you on behalf of WESPAC. Thank you for being here today. If you want more information about WESPAC, you can check out the website. But they have been doing social justice work, engaging in various efforts for the last 44 years. So again, it's a worthy place to support, and again, welcome.
I just want to make sure you're ready. Will the first panelist please come up for the first panel discussion, I'm sorry. Educating, organizing Black communities around the political process. We have Minister Dr. Hafiz Muhammad, Eastern Representative of the Honorable Minister of Farrakhan in the Nation of Islam. Dr. Robert Baskerville, founder of Rise Up and co-host of the People Before Politics radio show. Soraya Sampson, President and CEO of the Urban League of Westchester County. And Jamani Williams, New York City Council member, 45th District, Brooklyn. And the moderator is my brother from another mother. They always get us confused.
I don't know why.
Kenneth Chamberlain Jr. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Will all elected officials please stand up? We'd like to welcome you. Thank you. And also, if you're representing an organization, will you please stand up? Any organization, whatever organization you represent. Beautiful. And say your name.
Matthew Meacham, Treasurer, New Rochelle, NAACP.
Thank you.
Mondale Jones, I'm a member of the Spring Valley NAACP in Rockland County.
Thank you.
Brenda Smalls, a member of the NIAC NAACP in Rockland.
Thank you.
Jackie Young, member of Good for Girls Incorporated.
Thank you.
Lucille Williams, member of Mount Vernon NAACP.
Thank you.
Daphne Meadows, member of Westchester Rockland Gardeners Association and the Westchester chapter of the National Black Social Work.
Thank you.
Ron McGregor, Westchester Rockland Guardians Association and the
Black Social Work.
Thank you.
Brooke Jones, president of Westchester Corrections Association.
Thank you.
Kelly Kerr, NYCD 16 Indivisible.
Thank you. Who from the back? We're gonna go from the back and move up.
Doug, they're showing up for racial justice.
Thank you.
Tyree Wilson Samuels, second vice president of the Mount Vernon NAACP, also National Congress and everything.
Thank you.
Janice Griffith from Greenville White Plains NAACP.
Thank you.
Martin McDonald, President of Peekskill Branch of the NAACP.
Thank you.
Latifah Williams, WESPAC, and Westchester Coalition for Peace.
Thank you.
Julie Karen, Martin Luther King Institute for Nonviolence, and Westchester Coalition for Police Reform.
Thank you.
Jasmine Henson, Urban League of Westchester.
Thank you.
And Jackie Holmes, Rivertown Episcopal Parishes for Immigrant and Race Relations.
Thank you. Gail?
Gail Baxter, WESPAC.
Thank you.
Tasha Young, Lower Hudson Valley Progressive Action Network.
Thank you. That's what it's all about. Thank you. Did I miss somebody? Oh, I'm sorry.
Lisa Aspinall, Calawan, member of Peekskill NAACP and president of the Peekskill Board of Education.
Thank you.
Jen Margolis, Slow Plains Greenberg, NAACP, and Indivisible New Rochelle.
Thank you.
One more.
Oh, I wasn't sure if you did that.
Gary Calawan, first vice president of the Peekskill NAACP.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank everyone.
Hi, I'm Alfreda Williams, county legislator for the district you're located in now. But I'm also representing the Westchester Black Women's Political Club.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, twin.
Thank you.
Once again, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the first Westchester Black Political Conference. My name is Kenneth Chamberlain Jr., and I am the moderator for the first panel on educating and organizing black communities around the political process. I'm also one of the founders of the Westchester Coalition for Police Reform. Now, when we talk about the political process, we're talking about a formulation and administration of public policy. And that's between social groups, political institutions, elected officials, and of course there's public opinion. And with that, there are many misconceptions as well as misperceptions which can make politics very frustrating, to say the least. When we look at the current political climate and this quest to make America great again, we have found that many people have developed a sense of hopelessness because they feel like many of the elected officials are not listening to them and do not have the best interests at heart of the communities that they serve. But I always say that we can't hold elected officials accountable if we don't hold ourselves accountable. And we do that by educating ourselves and involving ourselves in this process. If we do not make our voices heard, if we do not challenge the leadership, then we cannot complain about how they lead. So how do we do this? This is the reason, or one of the reasons, for this conference. So I'm pleased to be here with my four distinguished panelists here who are going to help us navigate through this, give us some of their thoughts and opinions on it, and get us to really understand why it's very critical that we involve ourselves in this process. So now, each of these panelists I've been around, I've heard speak, and I know that when we put microphones in front of them, they can talk. But when you are passionate about the work you do, there's nothing wrong with that. But we need to set up just a few ground rules. You know? Okay. So I have about 6 or 7 questions that I want to ask the panelists. You will have about 2 minutes to respond. I will cut you off if you go too long. But I'm not looking for all the panelists to respond to the questions. Maybe 1, 2 at the most. If there's something that you have a difference of opinion in something that one of the panelists said, you know, I definitely will allow that. But I want to make it very clear that this is not a debate. This is a dialogue. This is why we're here, because we are trying to find ways to work together. So with that being said, Let me get my questions out. Now, this first question, I actually would like each panelist to answer because I think that it's, no, you can't go anywhere, Soraya. But Miss Lena Anderson, president of White Plains Greenberg NAACP, has just come in, and she can also sit on the panel as well. We don't want you to leave, Miss Sampson. you cannot leave.
Wonderful. Challenging day, but wonderful. Honored to be here.
Hey. So as soon as she catches her breath, I'll actually start on the other side with Dr. Bob and ask this question while Ms. Anderson is getting herself together. So the first question that I have is, has the black community's involvement in the political process changed within the last 5 years? And if so, how? What is the current state?
So I think the answer to that question firstly depends on how we conceptualize politics. Too often, we work with a very narrow notion of politics that's limited strictly to the electoral sphere. And although we have seen an uptick in African American participation in particular, especially as a result of President Barack Obama's historic two-term administration, most recently we saw a significant downturn during the 2016 presidential election. So in that sense, what we have witnessed is, I think, is a historic pattern that predates the current period. However, the real shift, I think, in black politics, and I would say for that matter, politics all across the country, has been in a more popular, grassroots-oriented politics that understands that it is not only the electoral sphere that's important in order to bring about change, but it also requires social movements. The presence of members of the historic civil rights organizations here today is a testament to that tradition of popular mobilization. When we talk about the limited advances that I do think that we have witnessed over the past several generations, the primary impetus for that has been popular grassroots mobilization that has looked to bring pressure not only in the electoral sphere proper, but through a number of other tactics outside as well. And in that sense, I'm rather hopeful because our collective presence here today is a testament to the recognition of the importance that we need to go beyond the electoral sphere proper. If we have both electoral politics combined with the vigorous grassroots movement that's outside as well, I think there is some promise, but I have to say that this is only a start.
Thank you, Dr. Bob. Minister Hafiz, would you like to piggyback on that? Do you agree or disagree?
First of all, beginning all things in the name of God, the beneficent, the merciful. We say Allah, but there is only but one God, the creator of all living things, the revealer of all truths, and the sender of all prophets. Thank you, Damon, and Black Westchester, and all who are present. Black voter participation is in a state of apathy. Let's just shoot it straight. American voter participation is in a state of apathy. It takes very little votes to elect a governor, under 4 million, and you're talking about 8 million people in New York City. It takes less than 3,000 to elect a council person in a district where there's hundreds of thousands of persons. So voter apathy is down among the human family, and it's pneumonia in the black community and the brown community, which I call original and aboriginal communities. I don't ascribe to the language of minority because I'm sorry, we are the majority within the state of New York, within New York. We are the majority in many city councils. Minority is a term that is only used by which to segregate a people to always be second class. And so youth among us today are agitated and making a change. The young people among us today are coming into leadership, both men and women. And we must be ready now for a change where we have leaders who are about political business and not politicians faking it until they can make it, acting as though they're a leader. I'm happy to be next to my councilman, Jamani Williams over here. He's a true leader about political business, an example of what I'm talking about.
Thank you,
You're welcome. Thank you.
So, I want to come on the other side right now, and I want to speak to the president, both the presidents actually, of the NAACP and of the Urban League of Westchester, starting with Ms. Lena Anderson.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
So, my question is, what are the common misconceptions about participation and involvement when it comes to politics? And how can we combat these misconceptions and communicate more effectively?
We saw in the recent Alabama election that when an issue is clear, we turn out. And it sometimes is difficult to clarify issues. And so one of the challenges is educating our public, our community, on how elections work. So many young people tell me, my vote don't matter. And you know what? The way districting is going on, the way gerrymandering is going on, they're not wrong. Because we have to participate and understand on that level how to challenge this redistricting catastrophe that has relegated our votes to not being counted, such that even when we win, we lose. And it's across the country. And it's also regardless of party. Because when the Democrats are in, they do the same thing.
Right.
So we have to understand how to deal with gerrymandering and redistricting such that we are not adversely affected. And in that way, we can impact policy. Because they got to pay attention to us. I tell our young people the worst thing that happened in the last election, when Bernie got knocked out, so many of our younger people just got disgusted and said, we're not voting. We don't have the luxury of not voting. We have to vote, even if it's for the lesser of the evils, so that the major constituencies see that we are voting, so that they see that we are willing to be participants. So I agree with the previous two speakers. Apathy is rampant, the data is skewed, and somehow we have an obligation to educate. We've got to help our people understand how policy has changed. So the NAACP throughout the years has had this legal agenda of harassing legislators, harassing people by phone, by any means necessary to get their attention and to get them to understand what our agenda is. The problem is with that, they smile in your face. And they make you feel, we got it, we're going to vote your way. But we see what happens on the congressional level. The filibustering, the meandering, the political ploys so that they can have some other advantages. So we've got to dig deep with participation in our communities, with an understanding, with education. And how we get people out is still a challenge. Because so often we're preaching to the choir, you all. You know, so often we're telling the people who already care. So I want to say, I agree with what's been said. The challenges are huge, and education is key.
Thank you.
Are we able to answer any questions?
Sure. There will be a point of question and answer, so please save your questions. I know that it's very important that once you hear these panelists speak, that the audience is going to have quite a few questions themselves, so that'll be great. But Madam President, Ms. Soraya Sampson, would you like to respond?
Yes, I would. Yes, I would. Yes, gerrymandering is an issue. Apathy is a huge issue. but also the belief that it's only important when you show up for those national elections is our biggest issue. When you don't show up for your local Board of Education elections, when you don't show up for your local congressman, assemblyman, your local mayor, your local board of your legislators, your city council, that's where you miss the point. You miss the point because they get to impact what happens on a larger space. So stop thinking that the only thing that matters is who sits in Pennsylvania Avenue. What matters is who sits around that little room right in the center of your town, and you need to show up for that. Just speaking also from, I have kids. You'll hear about them all the time. I talk about them all the time.
You should.
But speaking about the issue of the passion of the youth, my son was a passionate first voter when Bernie ran. But when he lost the primary, his tweet after that with the Democratic convention was, "I'm with her, I guess." But here's the truth. You don't always get to vote for the person that you are passionate about. They may lose on the first round, but you still need to be involved, and you still need to choose at that point the lesser of two evils, or three evils, or how many other evils, or you'll end up with the most evil. So you do actually have to control.
Thank you, Ms. Soraya Sampson. Councilman, this question is definitely for you. I mean, we've heard, and I'm sure many of us in here, when you ask people about voting, many people say, "Why vote? What's the point? Nothing's going to change." So, as a city councilman, what are some of the biggest challenges that you face regarding that political process?
I'm probably going to answer a smorgasbord of questions. So, one, I just want to acknowledge the most important person here, the timekeeper. He forgot to announce that. We had somebody holding us to it. But thank you, WESPAC, for having me here. Also, hopefully at some point, I know we recognize an elected official, but I didn't get their names. I'm hoping we have the ability to do that as an elected official. One thing I'm thankful for the minister pointing out that voter apathy is universal, not just in the black community. We have a tendency to ask questions as if the black community is doing something different than anyone else. But I will say, the black community can't afford to do what other people do because they are in a different situation. That's a very important distinction to make, and we have to push that. I also always want to make sure, I forgot who said it, because a lot of people, the one thing the Orange Man, the White House has done, he's a great organizer. Everybody's coming out now, which I appreciate. He's doing the devil's work, and all the people of God are kind of organizing around that. But I always want to make sure we make it clear that it didn't start with him. There was a lot of people, including Democrats, who laid a fertile ground for this to take apart. Hello? Just want to make sure, including Democrats that laid a fertile ground. And most of the places where particularly black and brown people are catching hell, I don't know if I can say that, I just did, there are Democratic leadership, from the governor to the mayor to the city council that are in those places. And they are the problem just as well. And so one thing I'm hoping that the community learns is nobody should take the black community's vote for granted. I'm hoping that we'll learn that as we're going through this process. The apathy is one thing that you do have to push back on. And of course, in these communities, people are dealing with a lot of issues that others aren't. So people are working 2 and 3 jobs. People are trying to figure out where they're going to live. The important thing is to try to connect what they're dealing with from the how much you're paying for a bag of M&Ms to that job you don't have is connected. So people say they don't deal with politics, and I'm like, you do. You're just not connected to the high level, which we have to make sure that you are. The other thing is I often hear people say, I don't get involved in that because of things like you said. Doesn't mean anything is bad. And the analogy I make is, I concur. You would probably say the same thing about capitalism, the system we're in, but you wouldn't tell anybody not to get a job and make money, because that's a tool that you need. So while it's bad, my thing is to use every tool that you have to try to make it better.
Okay, thank you. Great answer. Would anybody else like to expand on that?
Yeah.
Minister Hafiz.
My teacher, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, has always taught us that politics is not the panacea to any of our ills.
Right.
Our root problem is not a political one that necessitates a political solution. Our root problem is a spiritual one that necessitates a spiritual solution, not religious. See, when you deal with religious, you're dealing with symbols and signs.
Right.
You're dealing with euphoria like a spiritual drug dealer. Then when the high goes down, the people still have nothing.
Right now.
When you're dealing with a spiritual solution, you're dealing with something that is internal from the God, the Creator within Himself. So the scripture says, greater is He that is in you than he that is in the world.
Absolutely.
Politics is a necessary tool of advancement, but it is worldly.
That's right.
And Minister Farrakhan has said we need God-inspired people to come into politics, not to be religious, but to bring a mind of God with the world. See, heaven and earth work together, but heaven dictates to the earth, not the earth dictating to heaven. And so it's my duty to give counsel to my dear councilman, and it's his duty to help me with services for the needs of the people. And Alabama, let's, I don't want us, not the people here, not my sisters here, stop acting like a little Messiah came to birth in the Alabama elections. Doug Jones got in by only 30,000 votes. He got 683,000 some change. And Roy Moore, the alleged, whatever you want to call him, you know that he was the other side. Whatever he did in his life that was bad, I don't know because I'm not in his life. But that man got over 650,000 votes. So in Alabama, it is still polarization.
Absolutely.
As it was when our President Barack Obama won his second term. He had 57 million votes, and the Republican challenger had 50 million. So it was only 7 million separating in the country. We got to wake up and drink black coffee with no cream, no sugar, and see things the way that they are in order for us to change them. We cannot continue in our community, I'm finished, to be lulled to sleep anymore. We got to wake up and change how we deal with political process. And those that serve must be held to an accountability and not get elected, and you never see them come in this form like this again. And when they come, they already have casted a vote when you should be coming to your constituents, asking them what vote you should cast, then get on the floor and say, I'm not speaking my conscience, but I'm doing for the people, by the people, with the will of the people.
That's right. And Doug Jones had to be forced to hire a black person. Let's be clear about that.
Put that in the microphone.
Doug Jones, who you referred to as the people assume when the Messiah came, had to be forced to hire a black person. After all those black people came out and voted for him, he was about to have an all-white staff.
Now, before I go further, I got a look from Dr. Bob over there on the end. It looks like he has something that he wants to say.
So as we take up the question of why there is this record level low of voter apathy here in the United States across all communities, I think the question that we must consider is the failure of the policies that have been forwarded by the two major parties to actually capture the imagination of people. Too often, young people and others, poor people, sit on the sidelines of politics precisely because the policy offerings really do not present to them viable, feasible opportunities for self-improvement. And I think that as we talk about education, we need to really make the central focus not merely how we can instruct people on how to participate in the political process to make choices that are already on the table, but instead we have to talk about the creation of independent centers of thought that look to formulate policies that push us beyond the limitations that we're currently being offered. I say this especially because there's lots of polls which have suggested that millennials especially have voicing historic levels of dissatisfaction with capitalism. The last time we saw here in the United States a crisis of capitalism was during the 1920s and 30s, the Great Depression, which saw the simultaneous rise of fascist forces which threatened the very existence of African Americans today, African Americans. And I'm reminding everyone of this. I see the poster here of the Spanish Civil War, which was a battle against fascism fought in Europe in part by people from American shores because they wanted to be sure they prevented that fascism from spreading here at home. We have a similar kind of challenge today in the form of Donald Trump and the very forces that have put him in the White House. And the reason why so many people are dissatisfied with what's going on and what has partly fueled his rise is because we're not able to offer any real alternatives, and it has to start at the grassroots. We cannot look to Washington. The two parties are in a stranglehold with corporations, and we've got to push beyond them.
Councilman Williams.
I was going to let it go, but I got to bring it up, and because and I appreciate what was said earlier, but I just want to make sure we reframe certain things because I think two people said we have to vote for the lesser of two evils, but our young people don't want to hear that. They are tired of voting for evil at all. And so we have to find a way to rephrase that so that we don't have to vote for evil. Now, I was a Bernie delegate, very proud. I got a lot of crooked eyes when I was a Bernie delegate. Now everybody wants to take pictures of Bernie, but that's a whole nother story. I wish that some of our community, even if they don't like who's on the ballot, will come out and vote for themselves, even writing their name, just so that it can be registered that they voted, so that we can be present. So you don't have to choose evil if you don't want to. This thing with Trump, obviously, was the starkest difference. Like, I wrote an op-ed after Bernie and said, look, if you live in a swing state, you got to throw up a little bit and vote for Hillary because of what it is. But I think presenting now what we have is a better way. Just saying, look, because things didn't happen, we got to deal with the Supreme Court crap. We got to deal with all this evilness that this man is putting out. Because we just have to frame it in a way that young people will continue to listen. I don't like the Clintons. I'm sorry, black people love the Clintons. I'm not sure why. Everybody has done some good things, so I don't want to say they didn't, but that's another discussion. There's an issue with how we're communicating so people can do what they have to do. Clearly, Hillary would have been better than Donald Trump, but we shouldn't even got to that point. We have to talk about why the DNC did what they did, why they refused, why they didn't give Bernie's people a bunch of play. So there's a bunch of steps that happened before we get into the people who didn't come out and vote, and I just want to make sure we always talk about that and make sure the language you're using is enticing so young people can continue. But that wasn't, that was all about that.
I agree with you. I think we should always start looking for the best that we can get. I think we should always look for what we want. We should always aim to get what we want. But I don't think we should drop out of the process when we don't get that first choice. And a lot of people dropped out of the process when they didn't get what they wanted. And we have to be careful that we follow it all the way through to the ballot box.
I definitely agree, however. I agree with my councilman. He took the words right out, and I just say it like this. I didn't like either Trump nor Miss Clinton. Though my teacher said she was the more experienced person. And then he could have brought more business, which he has not done. I don't know when he's going to do, but the point is, I didn't want either one of them. I was leaning toward Mr. Bernie Sanders. We were just concerned how he would get across his ideas. But when you were robbed of an opportunity, see, we forget that. Congresswoman Debbie Wasserman Schultz is no longer there. And she lost in her district because she worked with the Clinton campaign to rob the Bernie Sanders campaign of an opportunity that might have steered the country domestically and internationally where Israel is concerned, in a different direction. He was robbed of that. So when that happens, I don't vote for the lesser of two evils because I don't deal in evil. My scriptures tell me in both Bible and the Quran, you must deal with right to get rid of wrong. And I didn't believe. I believe one was going to take us to hell in a rocket ship, and he's doing it now. And I believe the other one would have slowed it down, but she has hawkish ideas of war.
That's right.
See, we didn't look at, and you got to ask. I know we're in Westchester.
That's right.
I know that the home is near here, but they got nothing to do with it. You need to check the voting records.
That's right.
What was done for our people, and what was done in the state, and what is done from their foundation in our AT, where they produce rights for themselves. And this ain't nothing on them. I'm saying about choices. We should not have been robbed of the third choice that we could have worked with. So we need an alternative party. We need an alternative political machine, because the Republicans don't want us, and the Democrats keep a carrot on a 90-foot stick that we can never reach or achieve. And Van Jones said it, when Ms. Clinton lost, she should have invested more money in black and Latino communities than they did in white communities, by which she could have got the vote out. And we wouldn't have so much apathy that we have right now.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
That's the point.
So I'm listening, and I'm going to really address the elephant in the room right now. Okay, and that is black leadership. It has failed us many times over.
They could get it too.
Thank you, sir.
I'm ready. I'm ready for that. Let's pass the mic on that. We ain't got no problem.
I know that many of us have this tendency to want to vote for people just because of the color of their skin. And I can say from firsthand experience, even though I'm supposed to be unbiased, as my co-worker told me, but I can't help it. Okay, I sat with many black elected officials, and they have, told me it was raining when they did other things.
But it was yellow.
Okay? But what do you say to someone who really doesn't understand this political process? I mean, how do you really get them involved? I mean, what is one major way that we can make a real substantial difference?
All right, so Kenneth, I know you speak from multiplicity of experiences with us. And in the NAACP, we often say we don't support any people. We're all about the issues. We don't have any friends. We have issues. And when you speak to our issues, we may support you. So when we talk about issues on a local level, because I like that connotation, that we're very powerful in our own communities. And right now, White Plains and Greenberg are blowing up with development. And, people of color are being pushed out of their homes, out of apartments. Affordable housing is a myth. And when we talk about this with the developers coming in, we have to be firm in demanding some sort of community benefit from all this development that's going on. And this is where the NAACP is trying to have a voice. Now, the sad thing is that when we have these developers in the room and we invite our community in because they want to see how many people we got, that becomes a problem. So motivating us on the issue that most concerns us, the issue that we can do something about, is where we have to go and what we have to do. When I'm talking to these developers in a room and they're about to redesign apartment buildings that have historically been affordable housing, and they're talking about rents that start at $2,000 for a one-bedroom apartment.
Studio
even.
That's right.
I need to know, well, what do you have for people who can't afford that? How many units? And I'm not talking about the mandated 5% that the federal government says you should have. I'm talking about how you're going to keep the community that's here. I want to talk about how are you going to train people in the community to be part of this development. The plumbers, you need contracting people, you need electricians, you need those people. And so that's where we matter. We matter in that conversation, and we need help.
Part of leading is knowing how to share leadership and engage people who may not always be involved in the process and give them ownership of the process. And I just got my sheet of paper. Part of what we're doing this year at the Urban League is that we're organizing a collective voter registration drive. Not in 2020, but in 2018, because we need everybody involved. And I just got the list. We have the Panhellenic on board, the Deltas on board, the Alphas on board, the Zetas on board, the Sigmas on board, Omegas on board. We have the YMCA, the Theodore Young Community Center, Neppahan Community Center, the League of Women Voters. But we need everybody on board, and we need the education to start on different levels. And I'm probably if you ask me to speak, I'm probably the least likely to do a lot of talking, but I like to see the work get done. So the work is getting done because we need to engage all of our leadership, all of our organizations. We need to let them know that if you have a felony conviction, you can still vote. We need to get the word out there to our community so that the folks who believe that they cannot participate in the process understand that. We're also trying to get as many of the religious institutions on board as possible to get those voter registration cards in their churches. We'll pick them up if you want us to pick them up. We'll do whatever we need to do to not only get you to register to vote, but we're also trying to work with organizations. I have one, should I say the name? We've reached out to Uber. Uber is new in Westchester. To pick up folks who can't get to the polls, to give us a certain number of rides, so that they can get our folks to the polls as well. So in terms of grassroots, that's where everything is. Everything is grassroots, because your vote is one vote in one house, and in your community, wherever it is, it's one vote. So each one of those votes have to count. Bring your organizations on board. If you don't want to join with us, just get those voting cards wherever you are and get the people involved.
To your original question, the question you just asked about black leadership, and they can get it too, right? So we have to hold everybody accountable. I always want to make it clear, identity politics has its place and is important. It's important for a young black man to see a young black man in a position of power. It's important for women to see women in power. But at some point, you have to say that's not enough. So every brother ain't a brother. And as Nina Turner said, just any blue won't do. And so you have to hold people accountable for the things that they're going to do. I want to make sure I shout out Chris Johnson, councilman from Yonkers. And I saw Dr. Fulani somewhere. And there she goes. We don't always agree, but she holds everybody accountable, including myself. And that's what you need, to make sure everybody is held accountable. And some of the things that have concerned me the most that I've learned here, one is how hard it is just to do the right thing. Mm-hmm. People will talk in front of the mic about what they want to do, and when we get into the rooms, it's something completely different. And the second is how cheaply they will sell out for it. And so they're not even getting something good. They might get a title for themselves, something like that. And then lastly is, for many elected officials, the seat that we hold is more important than the people that we're serving. And they get away with that because nobody is holding them accountable. Everybody's getting elected over and over and over again, and people need to be turned up. People there needs to be 1,000 Dr. Fulani asking hard questions, pushing when it's difficult, making sure people are coming out and voting. We listen to people who vote. Unfortunately, you may not believe it, but we will look at data and say, what area comes out and vote? They will be listened to quicker, unfortunately, than the community that doesn't. And so that's why it's critical to come out and vote, even if you vote for yourself, even if you vote for your mom, even if you write her name in, something, so that you are participating in the process. But just because you're a Democrat, just because you are a black leadership, doesn't mean you are the person who should be holding that position. And I would say if you just need a job, get another job. Allow somebody that wants to make transformational change be the person that's in that seat.
Sounds great, sounds great. But listen, Position versus purpose. I always talk about that, but we are at the point in time right now that you, the audience, get to ask the panelists some questions. Because I'm sure that I didn't ask all the questions. I'm sure it's something that I left out. Reverend, I know you had your hand raised. You want me to go out here first? Okay. Any questions? Okay. Let me start here and work my way to the back.
So my question is real brief, and I have my own thoughts, but I'd like to hear from you all. What are concrete ways, once you've supported them, you've supported their platform, they're now in office, what are concrete ways to hold officials accountable?
We have the elected official here, and he'll give you the advice later, but let me tell you this. You need to be in contact with them. They need to hear from you about anything you care about. If they did it right, you tell them thank you. If they did it wrong, you ask them why, and you tell them next time they need to get it right. So you need to be in constant contact with the people who you've placed in office, who you put your vote to, and who you've given your trust. But that is and let them know, listen, this is not in the best interest of this community that puts you there, and you might not be there next time if that's the way you're gonna move.
Let me share something. I went on to Nita Lowey's site, and I go often because you'd be surprised at the hateful comments that come in. And when she's voting for affordable health care and other things that benefit our community, she needs to know, she needs to hear from us that she's on the right track. Because believe me, the others are letting her know they're not happy. So the computer is the new wave, the blogs. That's a way that you let your politicians know one way or another. And it's good to give them the accolades that they're on the right track. And it's good to let them know when you're not happy.
One thing I think you said, I can't remember what it was, which was important, how important local politics is. We pay attention to the president and sometimes the governor or mayor, but the local politics is extremely important. So even if they elected a dog catcher, we need to be out there voting for the dog catcher, because those are the people who touch you the most. One of the things we made a mistake with Barack Obama, he had some issues, by the way. He deported more people than anybody before him. But that's another conversation. We get mad, but we got to hold everybody accountable. We voted and then walked away. And so we definitely have to stay engaged in a better way. And all communities have community board meetings. They have precinct council meetings. All those little meetings, all those block association meetings, people have to remain engaged. So don't just cast a ballot and walk away. Remain engaged in your community at whatever level you can. You can just have a block association and be engaged. And that constant communication is important. People are a pain in the butt, and they should be. Whoever I'm constantly hearing from, I'm most likely to respond. And when they put a call out, you need to respond too. If I'm saying we need this, we need people to show up, people have to show up. I always say do what you can with what you have where you are. And I think if we did that, we'd be in a much better place. If you have 30 minutes when you come home from work, spend that 30 minutes talking to your neighbors about what needs to be done, and then present that to your local elected official and hold that person accountable.
Okay. Next question.
Good evening. This question is for the two ladies at the end. So much of I hear you say, vote for the lesser of two evils. The question would be is, how do we tell a millennial, just vote for the lesser of two evils, when they don't understand you? Secondly,
see, that's not exactly what we said.
Let me finish my question.
Okay.
Let me finish my question. So don't take it personal. Okay. But we talked. A young brother from New York City talked about write-in votes. I have looked on your site, looked on National Urban League site, and I've never seen that being mentioned or being pushed. Write-in a vote. This year, I voted for myself for president. I didn't win because I only had one vote, and my son, so I had two. But why are we not, as humans, not just people, black people, but as humans? I'm a registered voter. I'm not going to share what party I'm from. But how come we're not telling our children? I've told my children, write in yourself, write in your dad, write in your mom. There's no lesser of two evils. That's the old politics. And that's the reason why there's apathy in our community. I'm telling you, because it's the old politics. Stop the lesser of two evils. get the word out, write in something. So that young man who's 18 to 34 will come to the polls and feel that his words and his votes mean something because he's voted for himself. Thank you.
All right, I want to clean up the context of the statement because what was said was when Hillary forced Bernie out, we were stuck with voting for the lesser of two evils. That was the context. It was not an advocate for voting for the lesser of two evils. And this is something we do to each other. Right. We challenge on a very specific note those things that we think we heard. We really need sometimes to ask more questions. I appreciate your question. And it's true. You can write yourself in, and anyone can write themselves in, as opposed to voting for someone that they really don't care for either one. So it is a viable alternative. But I think a better alternative is to encourage our young people to run, to really find out what it takes to run, find out what it takes at an early age. In the high schools, when I taught economics, I had my economics class following our elected officials. And it was their charge to tell us what they were doing and what they were not doing in terms of our economic benefit. So I think it's laudable that you're telling your kids something else. Good.
Each one of us should be sure that we're voting for the people who support us and our community. And so if you believe that nobody who's on that ballot will support you or your community or the issues that are important to the people who are important to you, then go ahead and find another alternative. I think people like the people that we're dealing with right now, because the Urban League is nonpartisan, the people like the people we're dealing with right now, at the end of the day, there is one benefit that nobody saw in the beginning, which is that they will bring us together. They will coalesce people who will sit on the opposite sides of the room and fight each other all the time when things are good. But when things are bad, people come together who share a common issue and care for the community. So there is a benefit that's going to be had now that nobody saw, those unintended consequences. The unintended consequences of putting in the crazy people in power will be the coalescing of community groups who may have had issues with each other. It's like the family. Your brother and your sister will fight and kill each other, but if somebody tries to touch one of them, the whole family will come together. I think the unintended consequence of what's happening right now is that people who may not necessarily have worked together in the past will be brought together in a way to really address issues that are important to the community.
Okay, Minister, you have something to say?
Yeah, real quick. I'm for all coming together, but I'm for being on top at the same time. We are blaming everything on this new president when there were 6 ones before him that put America, domestically and internationally, in the condition that she's in. He's just accelerating it. But 6 others put us where we are. And so, while everyone wants to use Trump, I use the terminology from my teacher, have no fear for the future. The future is ours, if we seize it in our hands. We must seize it with programs of prevention, intervention on the community level, that intersect on the political level with tools of service. Black politicians must be held to the standard with radical change. In New York City, and you're going to suffer it here further in Westchester, we should have had a black speaker in the city council. Should have been this brother here, or it could have been somebody else, but it's a shame that we could not have a black speaker. I'm sorry. I'm for humanity, but I'm tired of white men ruling over us when we are the majority. We have a beautiful brain to think, men and women and youth. So in all of us coming together, we need to learn to be on the top. I'm tired of marching for jobs and health care while everyone else has policy and control. So we want policy, we want control, And I'm tired of a mayor in the city I come from talking about there'll always be affordable housing. Why don't you make living wages affordable, that they can afford whatever housing they want to afford, and not just talk about there'll always be affordable housing?
Okay, we have another question.
Yes, my question has to do with something that's very grounded right here in Westchester County. Urban League?
Yes.
Okay. This here whole thing about Section 8 vouchers, that I see people line up to get these vouchers, and then they have nowhere to use the voucher. What kind of nonsense is this? This is very personal and very close, because we have people who are actually right here in Westchester County, all over, getting ready to be homeless. The voucher time span has ran out because they can't find affordable housing. The county under Astorino had turned over the voucher, the whole Section 8 situation, over to a private industry person to administer it. You know, it's ran by a private industry. It's not ran by the county. And they are denying people. They are not giving them enough time to find housing because there's nothing affordable. So what's the sense of HUD having vouchers, housing supposedly available to people when they can't find a housing, and Section 8 doesn't even give them enough time to use the voucher, so now they no longer have a voucher.
So let me
and they're becoming homeless. This is ridiculous. We need to talk about that, and no one is talking about it. No one.
So that's not just a Westchester issue, by the way. Let me say, I'm a tenant organizer by training. This is before anybody knew what community organizer was. People thought I was trying to teach tennis. This is before Barack Obama. So I've been working on these issues. By the way, and I'm going to say, I have an exploratory committee open to run for lieutenant governor of the state of New York. And I say that because as I've gone around and spoken, thank you for the clap. As I've gone around speaking to people, I'm finding a lot of things that are occurring happened in New York City a few years back. And it's a huge problem. And so you mentioned Section 8 in particular. Obviously, Dr. Ben Carson, who's in HUD, he's not just in the sunken place, he created the sunken place. And so we have some huge problems around when it comes to housing. I also chair the housing and buildings in the city. It is a federal program, so it is partially a federal problem as well. But there are things that cities can do locally that's not being done. A lot of it, I believe, has to do with Governor Cuomo, the Republicans, and partially the IDC in the state government. That if we can get better people in those positions, we can do a lot to change the housing laws to counteract what is going on with Section 8 and many other housing things. And the cities and the state have to give additional money to counteract the money that we're not getting from Section 8 and those vouchers. It is a long, complex answer that we can have a panel just on housing and what's going on. But it's scary what I see happening across the state. Hopefully, if I make it official to run, I'm going to try to connect the dots. There is a group, there is a website I'll tell you about that's actually trying to create a housing upstate, downstate alliance so that people can work together on these issues.
So in the interest of time,
housing for all, I think is good.
In the interest of time, we only have time for one more question, but please feel free to speak to the panelists after this.
Mine is not a question, it's a comment. I don't know everybody, I don't remember everybody's name, but you mentioned we need to start with spirituality and bring that in, but no one has mentioned anything about starting in the home. I work for an organization, it's called Good for Girls, and one of the things that we found out is that our girls do not know their history. They don't know anything about finances or anything like that. And in terms of how we treat each other in our homes, and I don't know anybody here, but how you raise your kids and how you treat your kids and how you teach them about politics, about finance, about empowering themselves makes a tremendous difference. Somewhere along the line, we sort of dropped the ball. You know, we as parents, we wanted the best for our kids, and so they become entitled. They don't understand anything about politics. They don't understand anything about finances. and they're some of the millennials, or that age group just before them, just after them, that are coming out. We need to start in the home with teaching our kids about being empowered, about getting into politics and understanding what that is, about getting themselves financially prepared to be able to fend for ourselves and not have to depend on anybody else, and then really work in our communities to make it better.
So I want to say I agree with all that. I just want to make sure we don't put one solution against the other. I think there's no one panacea, and I always say that because personal responsibility is clear, but I always hate having that conversation about personal responsibility without the systemic things that I think have been done purposely. And so I always say we're not trying to change it, we're not trying to fix the system, we have to completely change it because the system is operating, I always say, how it was designed to operate. There's nothing happening here that wasn't purposely put forth, so we have to uproot that. And part of that does have to do with the household. But I don't think you're doing it, but sometimes people walk away with an either or. Personal responsibility, systemic change. Both of those things need to be talked about at the same time. Lastly, because this might be the last thing, I just want to shout out, there was a young brother named from Surge, standing up for racial justice. And I want to shout them out because a lot of our times our less melanated allies will come in and they do it wrong. And they really try to take the lead. And oftentimes they'll come in and not adopt the real issues that black and brown people are working with. And Surge is a community of less melanated brothers and sisters, and that they are doing it right. They are really coming in as allies, just trying to support the work it's doing, and I just want to shout them out for that. Thank you.
So, let's give the panelists a round of applause. I want to thank all of you folks for participating in the panel. We are going to take a break right now. There is some food over there, but they're trying to figure out how they're going to set that up. So give them a little minute, network, talk among each other, shake a hand, make a friend. Thank you.
We saw the need to empower our community here in Westchester through educating, advocating, and endorsing candidates. The candidates that we look to endorse will go through an endorsement process, and we would like to follow up that endorsement with a financial contribution to their campaign. In order to do that, we have to raise funds. Traditionally, in the African American community, we do not have the same attention of our elected officials after we leave the voting booth, because we don't collectively attach a financial contribution. And we are here to change that. Not only are we going to vet our elected officials and candidates, we're going to hold them accountable to the issues that were discussed on the panel earlier and that will continue to be discussed. We are not meeting just to meet anymore.
That's right.
We are putting action and finances behind what we want, and we are going to hold people accountable until we get it. So I want to discuss some of the membership opportunities with the Westchester County Black Political Conference. Our annual membership fee for adults is $30. Our annual membership fee for a child up to the age of 18 is $20. Student membership, and we will require student ID, and this is not relegated to age because there are adult learners and all kinds of age learners. Student membership is $20. Senior membership over the age of 65 is $10. These are all annual memberships. The next level of membership is the lifelong membership. For an adult is $500. You never have to re-register if you pay that amount. You are a member for life. And the lifelong membership for a senior, 65 and older, is $250. This is comparable with other membership organizations. What does membership entail? I'm glad you asked. Membership has its privileges. You will get an annual subscription to Black Westchester magazine for 1 year. Thank you for the claps. It is so important to support local news media.
Yes.
It is so important to have a voice in the media. The media creates the narrative. Do you all know this? So we have this right here in Westchester. And we want to support this magazine and it eliminates the need to have a newsletter because we will inform everyone through the magazine of our efforts. Next, we will offer discounts to our events and fundraisers, and we will have them. We know that we like to have barbecues and parties and other kind of events. We're gonna have a lot of them because we like to have fun, and we're gonna have fun with a purpose. So as a member, you will have a discount to our events. Our meaning yours and ours when you join. Opportunities to network with like-minded people. For all the activists in the room, for all the helping professionals in the room, it helps when you get with one another and you get refreshed because we all have the same motive in mind. So that will create an opportunity to network with like-minded people. You will get a list of the candidates endorsed by this convention. You will have updates on social justice accomplishments, and we are working on them right now. You will be informed with the activities of this organization. You will also have updates on legislative accomplishments. We have policy writers in this organization, and we are in the process now of writing policy for real reform in Westchester County. And then you also get to network with citizens who resist all forms of inequality and injustice. What do you think? So I will pass out the paper that I just read from with the one correction that our senior citizens get a $10 membership. The paper says 20. So we invite you to join today. We do have a website, and we'll look forward to doing more events together. Also, lastly, we are looking for professionals in the educational fields, economic development and financial professionals, CPAs. We're looking for your expertise because we're not stopping. We're going to change this around for our communities. Thank you. Okay, so now getting on with the program. I have the honor to introduce our keynote speaker in the person of Dr. Lenora Fulani. Lenora B. Fulani, PhD, is the co-founder of the All Stars Project, Incorporated. She is also the founder and director of Operation Conversation, Cops and Kids. Dr. Lenora Fulani earned her PhD in developmental psychology from the City University of New York. She is the co-founder of the All Stars Project, where she currently serves as a Dean of UX and is director of the award-winning program, Operation Conversation, Cops and Kids, a series of dialogues and performance-based workshops with police and inner-city youth to help them improve and develop their relationship. She has conducted over 176 workshops involving over 3,700 police officers and inner-city youth. Dr. Fulani has long been active in creating change through political action. She has twice run for president as an independent. In 1988, she became the first woman and first African American in U.S. history to appear as a presidential candidate on the ballot in all 50 states.
That's right, that's right, that's right. She was the first. She was the first. That's right, set the record straight.
I like to say, and I'll say it often and I'll say it a lot more, the reason why Secretary of State Clinton could not say she was the first is because of Dr. Lenora Fulani.
That's right.
Who stands on the shoulders of Shirley Chisholm.
That's right. That's right. That's right. All right.
Dr. Fulani is currently spearheading the grassroots movement to prevent the New York City Housing Authority from privatizing public housing that has been built to provide decent housing for the poor. Before I bring up Dr. Fulani, I just want to say my personal testimony, and why I feel so honored to have her in the room and to meet her and to introduce her. I voted for Dr. Fulani. The first time I was able to vote in a presidential election, I voted for Dr. Fulani. I was a teenager, or maybe young 20s, I don't remember. One of the two. But not only did I see someone who looked like me, and was representing my interests. She spoke about a platform of equality and justice, affordability for more people. The student loan crisis that we're facing now was foreseen way back then in 1992.
Right. I agree.
She spoke about what a lot of us who were inspired by Senator Bernie Sanders, what he speaks about and spoke about. She spoke about it way back in 1992.
That's right. Yes, she did. That's right.
And I said to Damon, she was Bernie before Bernie.
That's right.
And she inspired me. And I have been in the political process ever since. And to one of the panelists and to Damon's point, a lot of things have not changed. They've gotten worse since 1992. We haven't gained the gains that we thought we would gain by the elected officials that we put in power. They have failed us. The two-party system, to Dr. Fulani's point way back in 1992, has failed us. In 2018, we're still being failed. So yes, I do caucus with the Democrats. No, I am not all the time happy with the Democrats. I am more of an independent person, but you know, in New York State, you can't be independent and vote because you can't be in the primary. So I just want to say that I am so inspired by having Dr. Fulani here. And without further ado, Dr. Lenora B. Fulani.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for that wonderful introduction. I'm really touched by it.
Hold on.
Thank you. I think, can you hear me
You gotta
better?
hold it.
Yeah.
And she gotta hold it.
I have to hold it, I can't hold it.
No.
I have to talk.
There you go. There you go.
So you can hear me now? Yeah. I am so glad to be here. I feel like this is an extension of my neighborhood because I've been coming to this part of town for so very long, and I have people here who I've known for years. I'm also from Chester, Pennsylvania, so maybe that's why. Whenever I have to speak to an issue that involves destruction of the poor, I turn to Dr. King and his writings. And you see, Dr. King did not only speak to having a dream, he also spoke to the atrocities of the time. Anyway, King spoke to the atrocities of the time that he and we were living in. And his dream before he was gunned down in Memphis in 1968 was not that 4 decades later, millions of America's poor would still be living and dying in poverty, or that hundreds of thousands of our people would end up being forced out of the housing that they live in and would wind up living on the streets or in shelters in cities all over this country. It's clear to me that if Dr. King were here today, he would be marching in the streets in opposition to all of this. He would be teaching all kinds of people what a horrendous position and perspective this is. And he would be marching against the New York City Housing Authority, NYCHA, and what it is doing to poor people. He would have marched in the streets of Chicago and elsewhere in response to the housing issue.
Yeah.
To me, this is one of the most important issues in this country for poor people, for our communities who are being isolated, alienated, and expected to live without any kind of shelter. I came of age in the 1960s. I grew up in a small town, Chester, Pennsylvania. I grew up poor. I was the youngest in my family. And if you grow up black and poor, you see a lot of devastation. You experience a lot of pain. I saw my father dying in bed when I was 12, because the ambulance service refused to come into my neighborhood and pick him up. And my family made a makeshift stretcher, put him in the car, and he died en route. I've lost nieces and nephews. I had 12. 4 of them are dead. And then there is the loss of the people who I grew up with. When you go back after graduating from college, and it's not only that you can't find people, but you find out that somehow they were killed or they died. As painful as all of this was, I didn't want to run away from it. I wanted to embrace our people, our communities, and their pain. I became a psychologist. I rejected everything that traditional psychology had to teach about who black people were, who human beings were, and helped to create and develop a new way of looking at and helping people who lived in turmoil and pain and otherwise grow. In New York City, as was mentioned, I'm in a fight for human policy in opposition to a lot of the people in public office who are insisting that their focus is public and public policy. I want to speak about what that looks like by talking about the efforts to destroy the New York City public housing without a plan for those who live there. NYCHA is privatizing public housing by transitioning public housing to so-called affordable housing, owned in part by private developers in New York City, while there is no plan for the likely displacement of 650,000 people who currently live in New York City Housing Authority. They want the land. It's great land. It's a lot of space. Their initial plan, and they've done this in 5 housing projects so far, was to build high-rises in the middle of open space and put rich white people there who had never lived in the same community of black people or with black people or any other kind of people, and that was supposed to go well. They have done some of that building, but people came to realize fairly early that that was not going to work, that there was going to be a complete and total madness, and that poor people were going to be locked out. I believe that the crisis we're seeing in public housing in New York City are being manipulated by elected officials, led by the mayor, to accelerate the wholesale transfer of public housing to the private sector, which will lead to the displacement of the poor. NYCHA's Next Gen, as it's called, calls for the privatization of its assets by selling its portfolio and building market rate and so-called affordable housing on low-cost or no-cost leasing of publicly owned land, and that the affluent and poor will share the land and live happily ever after. This is the city's attack on an abandonment of NYCHA's residents, compounded by the fact that privatization will dislocate families, destabilize our young people. Look at what happened in Chicago's transition plan. Where are the people? And look at the suffering. And it will destroy communities. So in the face of NYCHA's incompetence and their corruption, and with NYCHA's recently estimated $25 billion for a capital repair of the housing development, the mayor is seeking to end public housing in New York City. Part of that abandonment has been expressed in the horrible neglect over the years of public housing by the city. It's also expressed in the increased number of evictions, leaving people in filthy and unsafe and dysfunctional homeless shelters. People are living in public housing without heat and hot water. Every other day there is a front page article about people freezing and their kids freezing in their homes. There is also the lead paint outrage where the chair, Shola Olatoye, lied and then confessed that she lied. What she lied about was that she had signed off on the lead paint existence. They looked at the wall supposedly and determined that it was no longer there. And then she got caught because lead paint is all over housing projects. And she's still the chair of public housing in New York City. The Department of Investigation has been investigating NYCHA for the past 2 years. The mayor protects her like she's Queen Elizabeth or something, and won't take her on because he's complicit with all the deals that are being made and all of the attacks that are being made upon our people. Relative to the NYCHA Next Gen, that's what they call this brilliant plan, to turn over its land to developers for new housing, the mayor has been leveraging pay-to-play politics beginning when he first campaigned 5 years ago. His relationship to the Real Estate Board of New York has been in the news over the past 2 weeks. Reports that campaign contributions came from leading developers who have been getting design-build contracts to fulfill his goals of building 17,000 new units on NYCHA property. This so pisses me off, I could barely talk about it. It's like been going on. I'll wait for that. Over the past 3 to 4 years, I've been working with tenants and tenant leaders. At some point, the phones in my house started ringing, and people were talking about evictions. They were going into the housing developments and saying to people they should move to Buffalo and giving them $5,000. People would go. $5,000 sometimes seems like a lot of money, and they were stuck there. They couldn't find a house, and they couldn't get back to New York City. So I organized a committee. It's called the Committee for Independent Community Action. We've collected over 20,000 signatures from public housing residents and other New Yorkers calling on the mayor to stop privatizing public housing, and we're seeing a groundswell of support. We're taking out the message to middle class and wealthy people in our communities, Black, Latino, white, we don't care, that this is an issue that they have to take some responsibility for, that they have to care about. And people have given signatures, they've taken petitions. The movement, if you will, is growing. The important thing about all of that to me is that it gives people in housing a way to fight. Otherwise, it's very, very scary. You're living in a situation where you don't know when something is going to just go wrong. They made up these rules that if you have a son and he goes to jail, that when he comes back, he can't live in your house. So, I mean, what kind of world is this? Where did that law come from? How dare they relate to our people in this way? So many things are amiss. The extreme mismanagement of public housing on the part of the city. Our elected officials, our mayor and city council are partnering with real estate developers to enable the land grab. Then there's a lack of consistent investment in the people of our city who need it the most, and a rise in the number of evictions of public housing residents who have no place to go. Sometimes I feel like I'm back in Chester, PA in the 1950s and 60s. One thing that I wanted to mention, by the way, is that our city council and other elected officials have gotten a lot of money from revenue. My assistant just gave me the amount, and I, of course, just lost it. But people are getting bought off, and they need to be exposed, and they need to be dumped. But even more importantly, the people who are suffering need to be supported. And we need to make sure, as I see people in New York, that we don't let this happen. We just can't. We can't allow this level of destruction. So, I mean, I could talk for 5 more hours. I won't. I just want to read a quote that I love dearly. It's called Maladjusted. Today, psychologists have a favorite word, and this word is maladjusted. I tell you today that there are some things in our social system to which I am proud to be maladjusted. I shall never be adjusted to lynch mobs, segregation, economic inequalities, the madness of militarism, and self-defeating physical violence. The salvation of our world lies in the maladjusted. So I invite you to join the maladjusted. I just saw the revenue reports. New York City Council Speaker Corey Johnson raised over $505,000 for his campaign. He's a new head of the city council who came out of nowhere. Large real estate donations have infiltrated both ends of the race for New York City Council Speaker. To some extent, all 8 of the candidates who ran for City Council Speaker have demonstrated some conflicts of interest over the sources of their large donations, which people know because it's in the newspaper. And who is getting truly screwed by all of this are the people who live in NYCHA and live in our communities and who are being pushed out. And we are going to fight like hell to make sure that that's not an easy push. They have nowhere to go. And we're going to hold our elected officials accountable one way or the other, and I'm going to expose the hell out of them. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any questions? Oh, God.
Am I calling on the questions?
I'm going to give them my... Any questions from the audience? I think it's quicker if we just pass the mic back to her, maybe.
Hi, I'm Louise Jericho. Thank you so much for speaking and for this focus. I've been hearing a lot about holding politicians accountable. But I think it really starts before they even get elected. And one of the most powerful things that I heard in 2005 was Al Sharpton was being interviewed by Chuck Todd. And Chuck Todd asked him, "Who do you endorse?" And he said, "It's not who we endorse, it's who endorses us." And I think one of the things that has frustrated me is that as a community, we don't make demands on our politicians before we promise their vote. Like they continue to keep coming back. And I was just wondering, is anybody getting that message out? That we need to ask how are they going to serve us if you want our vote? So,
well, if you ask them that question, they're going to say, well. They're going to say, and they do say they're going to be the greatest politician elected in the history of the world. The real deal is how do you impact upon the process so that it's easier to get on the ballot. It's very, very difficult. As an independent, when I ran for president, we had to get 1.6 million signatures. We're still recovering. And I've run for a lot of offices, but it's not just, it's a very challenging, it's a hard thing to do. We should do it. We should figure out how to dump them, but in order to do that, you have to grow the community. A lot of people already demonstrate their disgust with them because they don't come out and keep voting for them, and they often don't have anybody else to vote for. It's challenging because they have a machine. If you run as an independent, it's quadruple to anything that you need in order to run. So I agree. I think that we have to build a base that continues to figure out ways to engage them. But what I'm responding to is that it's a real challenge. You have to really build a base in order to be able to accomplish that. So I agree.
Question?
Oh, thank you.
Hi, can you talk about the challenges and the struggles of being a woman candidate? I notice obviously with communities of color, the majority of representation are men, and can you talk about the challenges of being a woman of color just as a woman running for office, especially on a national level?
And how to overcome those challenges?
Yes.
Well, you can't become men. I mean, I think, well, the issue with running for office oftentimes, for me, I've run a number of times, had more to do with the policies in place and the requirements in order to get on a ballot. That's a big deal. And my experience of a lot of the women who have run for office, who run the same ways that men run for office, they end up doing the same kinds of things. I know that sexism exists. I know that there are all kinds of issues. But I think the way to engage them is you have to step out, do what you're doing. When people get in your way, expose it, and keep growing. I'm not intimidated by men. I married one and I got out of it.
There's some good brothers in the room. There's some good brothers in the room.
I have a magnificent son. So, thank you. I really do have a son.
I had a question because she had a statement, and I know her long time. There are some good men in the room. Yes, we are. And we know how to do more than just pick things up and put them down. She knows that. But look, Doc, what can we do? And I want to know what I can do in my office. What can we do? Because I have members that are in public housing. It's a big issue. The issue with lead was just dealt with, and the impact clergy, a meeting that I'm a part of in Harlem. What can we do to join you in this effort and help succeed in making life better for our people in public housing?
One thing that we can do is located in the numbers that are organized in opposition to it. And people who live in the housing project know that it's not just them, it's also other people in our community who are stepping out and making a statement about it. One thing that we have done is break through the silence, because the mayor and these other folks were looking to do this like under the whatever, so nobody would know what's going on. So a lot more people know what's going on.
Okay.
I think we should do a major march in the city of thousands of people, and it's not just the housing project people who need to come out. All of us need to come out and you cannot let them get rid of housing that 650,000 people live in. And the people in the housing development that I'm working with are very outspoken, they're very down for this, and they're very frightened. Because it has happened in a lot of places where they've just taken out public housing. And it should never, I mean, 650,000 people is no little thing. But bit by bit, they're vicious. We should go after the mayor, we should go after Shola. We should put pressure on our elected officials, who are silent for the most part. They act like this isn't happening. So we can
just hope.
Yes. Well, also we can do an event where we invite your elected officials to that event, and everybody that doesn't come to it, we can stop voting for.
That's right.
And that would make a real statement. You can't do this. You can't allow it.
I just want to say publicly, I'm ready to co-sponsor that with you.
Okay.
Let's make it happen. All right.
I've worked
Harlem for 17 years, and I know, well, first of all, they started in Mount Vernon, under Ernie, and I remember that. But Columbia University is a big proponent. So now we're talking about educational conglomerates who are basically, I guess, making deals that, you know, we'll let a certain number of your students in and they are buying up Harlem by the droves for housing, for all kinds of stuff. So how do we address that as well?
Well, I don't know all of the answers. I know I don't know that. But I think that going after some of the elected officials is an important issue because they are silent. And if we were able to unseat one, the rest of them would have a complete nervous breakdown because they think that they're so there that nothing can touch them. I like Jamon, and he should be, rather than worried about my being in the room, standing up and speaking out in opposition to this, and we can just name them. This is serious. I mean, it sounds absurd and ridiculous because that's such a huge number, but these people are serious.
I got a question.
Yes.
Well, a comment. But I can talk loud.
All
right.
I know you can talk loud.
I understand that you want to fight so it doesn't become prioritized, the housing. Is that correct? Did I understand that correctly? Privatized. That's what I said, right? I'm not. Okay. I got it. The politicians are an issue, but why not deal with those who want to try to take the corporates who want to take coming in? Why not deal with them too as well and let them know that they can't do that?
Well, if you deal, first of all, you can't just say to them they can't do it. You have to build the base.
That's my point.
Out of which you have something backing your words. If the political people weren't taking money from REBNY, which is the Real Estate Board of New York, and if they would support this, they would be responsible then for organizing the people who put them in office to stand up and fight with them. So you can't just, this isn't...
That's my point.
What is your point?
You can't think one side of the brain. It's a whole dynamic. So I'm saying you need to go out, those who want to try to come in and take your community, you need to deal with them too, as well as the political establishment who wants to sell your community.
You deal with them is that you run them out, or you make it impossible for them to do what it is that they're doing. People are dealing with them. They're exposing what they're doing. These people have $1 million a day in their bank accounts. So you have to organize enough on the ground to go up against all of that. What I'm doing is what we should be doing. I can't go speak to somebody on Wall Street and say don't do this to my people because they won't listen. So you have to build. That's what Dr. King did. He didn't go to the racists and say be nice. He built something so that he had a way to fight back. And the political people should be held accountable. They're elected officials.
I agree with you 100%.
Okay. All right.
Okay, my question is like two parts.
Where are you?
Over here.
Oh.
The two parts is, one, we know that they have passed a law that when people get arrested, they cannot get back into the public housing, which I already know is one of trying to get people to move out.
Yeah.
But this is the two parts I have. One, what do we do with those that are displaced now coming home? And two, how do you reverse that particular law, knowing that it displaces the youth coming back, and it breaks up families because some families can't leave that particular area. So where does the others go, and how do we work on that?
Well, one thing is that there are like 14 battles embedded in this fight because they're going at what they're trying to do is yes, and dislocate everything and everybody. So there are people who are concerned about that and who are working on to some degree on what you do when they say your kids can't come back in. But the other thing that that NYCHA is good at, and that the people who are running this are good at, is every other day they come up with another rule or law. So you can't smoke in public housing. If you get caught smoking, you can get thrown out. People should be able to smoke in their houses, and what they also do then is set people up against people. So I've decided the thing that I want to focus on, which is to organize people on the ground to oppose this. I think at some point we need to figure out how to scare the living daylights out of those people who are elected in those areas, and we need to build a base. Anybody who has other ideas, we would love you to come and help us. This is a huge fight. They've done it. They blew up the housing project in Chicago. If you go to Chicago, people live in slums. It looks like something out of the 1920s, like we're in the midst of a major time of despair. So these people are serious. Everybody should be doing something. And who's not doing this are the people who should be leading it. So we do what we do. The community rises up. So there are about 15 other things that they've come up with relative to creating havoc. And what I'm teaching the community is not to overreact, because that's what they want them to do, and then they throw the families out. We have to deal with some of this stuff straightforwardly, and other things we have to figure out how to circumvent.
Last question.
Hi, Dr. Fulani, thank you. I just wanted to share something with the group. What you're describing is madness, and there needs to be a method to deal with it. Tenacity, perseverance, and never give up. I want to use an example. My council person, Chris Johnson, is here, and I have hounded him. I text him.
That's probably why he's here.
I say, ask this question, you gotta do it. And now he's my county legislator. Even better. It gives me a bigger platform. But when you describe what we have to do, it is overwhelming. At 73, I'm saying, I'm done. Stick a fork in me. And it's really important that the ingredient that you're describing is tenacity and perseverance. And once you have that, you get the energy to keep moving forward.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Last question. Last question.
I just wanted to make a point to Reverend Norman's point about addressing the real estate developers. I think that, well, we already know the onus is on us, but not so much in community organizations. We need to be involved in the infrastructure. We don't realize that we need to be on zoning boards. We need to be on the planning boards. So that when we get the information about what condo is going up next to you, it's after the fact. It's too late because we're not at the table to be part of the decision-making process. Even going back to voting for your elected officials, we don't realize the necessity to become district leaders and become part of the process as opposed to just agitating from the outside.
Well, I have a response to that, because the process that I haven't become part of politically is I'm not a Democrat. I'm not a Republican. I'm not going to lock myself into those two parties, because it's like bamming your head against the wall. If they were doing what they were supposed to be doing, then we wouldn't have all of these issues. Also, I think people should join things, all kinds of things. But for me, this housing attack, it's like being in the middle of, the early 1900s and beyond, when we realized we weren't totally integrated into the society. It was when Dr. King chose to walk and fight and preach and move us to do something about things in our society that were obscenity and were just outrageous. So this is a new kind of attack in some ways, the attack on trying to move everybody who doesn't fit their description out of the cities, because they're not just doing it in New York, blowing up housing projects and then having nowhere for people to go, and making decisions that you have to be some kind of way in order to be a part of what this country is all about. So I think we all need to do something, and I think we should do different things. I'm not critiquing what people are saying, but I'm doing what I'm doing. If people have ideas that work, I would love them, and I would also invite them to come and teach other people how to do it. I think that's important. But this is a big deal. This is devastating to our communities, and we know they've done. Go walk the streets of Chicago. It's like being in hell, and then they describe it as, well, the kids are violent, yes, or like crazy or something. But what the kids are is that they're poor and they're displaced, and the city isn't fighting for them, and it's very, very challenging. They're not bad people; they're dealing with craziness. Right. So, yeah, we could all, yes, I'm traumatized, and I'm not there. We need to stand up and fight, and we should fight in all the different ways that we can. And I hope to shame the city council, but I don't even know if they have any shame. These people need to be either moved or forced to do more than what they're doing. And people aren't going to join all these committees. It's not clear where that's going to take us at this point, because I mean, I've sat in committee meetings, and it depends on what your relationship is to the people who've been running them for 500 years. So we should do everything. If you want to march and fight, you should come and support me, and I will always come up here and support you. And I thought that was the last question. Okay, all right, but then you asked, right?
I just want to make clear that this is a Westchester issue also, because we're not being explicit about that.
Thank you.
Public housing in Westchester has the same problem.
Yeah, I was going to talk about that.
Thank you, Dr. Kalani, but I just wanted to make along the same lines that in terms of the context, that for decades Westchester County has fought against the construction of affordable or low-income housing in certain communities, and has really, under Democrat and Republican administrations, has really had a kind of divided, a process divided based on race. So only certain communities were building housing to accommodate the poor and people of color, for the most part. During the Obama administration, the HUD has forced this county, it battled with this county for 8 years in trying to have them integrate housing throughout this county under a Republican county executive. And yet still, the most recent ruling on that was the Trump administration got in and says, you don't have to do it. So obviously in Westchester, there is a real need for construction of affordable as well as low-income housing throughout this county to have access to the poor and for working class people throughout this county. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's give him a round of applause. Anyway, thank you all. We got a lot of work to do. Thank you so very much.
We have another panel coming up, so we ask that you guys just have patience. We're going to get our panelists up here, and anyone who didn't get to ask a question, there will be Q&A time, and we are talking about housing.
Let's give another round of applause for Dr. Kalani, true fighter for the people. Will the next panelists please come up? Councilman Andre Wallace,
AJ,
Mount Vernon, County Legislator Christopher Johnson, Dr. David Holder, Senior Pastor, New York Covenant Church, and Minister Jazz. There go my sister right there, County Legislator Alfreda Williams, co-chairman of the board. Co-chairman of the board, y'all.
Right there, one at the door.
And my new saying is, if we can't get things done in Westchester, with the Latter administration and having Ben Boykin as the chairman of the board and Alfreda Williams as the co-chair of the board, I'm moving to Canada. Because it's over. It's over. I'd like to welcome everybody to the second half of the conference, where we want to discuss, after the beautiful lecture of Dr. Fulani, it seems fitting to discuss public policy and how public policy addresses the black community nationwide and specifically the black communities here in Westchester County. I mentioned in the opening about the 1992 African American Advisory Board report to then Andrew O'Rourke. And what we're talking about, they were talking about in that report in 1992. So we're going to move forward. Now we have two distinguished elected officials here from the county level and city level. And we have my sister, Minister Jazz, who is an activist, organizer, and political strategist. And my brother, Dr. David Holder. Now, I want to say about this brother here, I met him on the Ernie Davis radio show. And we had a great conversation because at that time he was talking about, he had a conference. And his conference was talking about political process, but rooted in God. You know, how do, see, because these politicians claim they're Christians, right? But the policies that they pass, Jesus wouldn't co-sign on them, Muhammad wouldn't co-sign, Abraham wouldn't co-sign on them. So I wanted this brother here, so when the elected officials talk about these policies and when we talk about these issues, Dr. Holder can give his assessment on where we are on the spiritual level, on that God level, if these policies reflect on who these elected officials claim that they believe. So I want to start off, there is, here in Westchester, specifically, but throughout the nation, they don't talk about homelessness. They don't talk about to address the homeless issue here in Westchester, right? And the reason why I say this, even in White Plains, you had the lady that was killed in the Galleria by a homeless man, right? You had Christopher Ridley, who was protecting someone from a homeless man and then ended up losing his life when cops thought he was the perpetrator and killed him. But policies around homelessness hasn't changed. So, we're going to start off with the elected officials. I know you just got to the county level, so, but you from Yonkers. I know some homelessness out there too now, right? You're a Yonkers City Council. So, from your experience and what you see from being in Yonkers City Council and now on the county legislature, we can talk about the homeless issue. Let me make sure it's on.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right, wonderful. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for an opportunity to be here this afternoon. So when I was on the Yonkers City Council, in my district, we have a homeless shelter, the sharing community. And not too long ago, I believe 2 years ago, the mayor saw that there were issues where the homeless people were sleeping. It was overcrowded, it didn't meet code, so on and so forth. And he woke the people up in the middle of the night, told them that they had to leave. They could not stay there because it did not meet code. I subsequently went to the sharing community and witnessed with my own eyes 13 individuals sleeping outside on cots on a cold September evening. Called the mayor the next morning, we played a little bit of phone tag, and I told him that what he did was deplorable and disgusting in every single way. He said, well, the county exec is wrong because they own the property and they need to make sure that it's up to code and so on and so forth. And I said, so that's right. And if you're right on the issue, then we need to talk about that and we need to blast the county executive. But to put people out in the cold is unacceptable. And so that's where we saw, unfortunately, politics come into play and not relate to people where they were and their circumstance. So what I'm happy to say is that I have colleagues on the county board who understand what people are going through, and that the policies that we have to put forward are not just nice pie in the sky policies, but policies that actually affect people in their everyday lives.
Councilman Wallace.
Thank you for having me here today, and thank everybody for being here. When I look at the homeless situation, especially when it comes to Mount Vernon, I noticed that it is not only the folks that are out on the street because they don't have the funds or something, but there's a lot of people that we don't supply mental support for, because they have a lot of mental challenges in our community. And what gets me the most is that I see how it has come down from the county many times, where they build these low-income houses in our communities in certain areas. When I say certain areas, I say Mount Vernon, Yonkers, New Rochelle. They dump everything there, but then when we call for the services, they don't have any money to give services to take care of these people. You cannot dump the people in our communities without giving them a way to eat. You cannot dump them in our communities without giving them a way to train to get a job. You cannot dump them in our communities if you don't have those type of mental services to help them through whatever issues that they're going through. See, we just look at it as we want to take all of these people in, and the county legislator said it well when he said that we had a big lawsuit. Nobody else wants it in their backyard. But the backyards they put it in, they don't want to put up any kind of playground, no nothing in that backyard. They just want to dump them there. We have to start to make everybody in the county of Westchester accountable to chip in, to share the burden of this particular issue that we're going through. These 3 towns can't do it all. So when we start to do that and reach out, and you know what bothers me the most? It's the most influential, richest parts of the towns and counties that don't want nobody in their backyard. You know? And they have the money to help, and they won't help. So we need to start to look at those things right now, and that will make a big difference in how we do things. Thank you.
Definitely, I agree. Hi, everybody. Proximity, that's the word that I'm going to use. I think that it's easy to say those people. It's easy to say the homeless crisis because it seems like it's something that's out there. But when you look at me, do you see someone that has been homeless, that has like recently been homeless? And it doesn't take much to be homeless, especially living in New York City. So, you know, just 1-2 paychecks go by and your unemployment doesn't kick in and you can't pay your rent, and that 30 days runs out on your tenant protection and your landlord gives you an eviction, and then you're homeless. And it doesn't mean that you have a mental disorder. It doesn't mean, so a lot of times we're not close enough to the issues, and then the people that are suffering suffer in silence, and then we're not coming out and supporting. So I think that we have to get back to what's called community. So when we start talking about the Black community, we have to really realize what that means to be community. And once we understand that, then we won't have a crisis because we are supporting each other. A lot of times we're putting it on the officials, we're putting it on the other people out here to take care of our people, and it is us. So I'm saying help Jazz out, right? Like help Debbie out, help, you know, like we need to start identifying people by their names and understanding who is it that we're working with, and not making it just like a policy thing, because nobody's gonna write policy for people like we'll write policy for ourselves.
That's right. That's right. Beautiful.
I couldn't be more in agreement with you regard to that.
very famous scripture. Many of you will know the scripture, Matthew 25, when you've done it to the least of these, you've done it to me. So we believe differently than, for example, I'm in New Rochelle. I was on the board for Hope Community Services, which is one of the largest organizations that help homeless people. And I can say as a former board member, they more so process people. They don't build relationships with people. They don't necessarily know their names and where they come from and their mental disability or ability. And so it's very difficult, even in New Rochelle's a microcosm, and I totally agree. When we help homeless people every Saturday. Right now we're helping them for the last 7.5 years, 3 hours a day. We don't just feed them. It's not a soup kitchen. We believe in relationships, so we call them our friends. And we try to find out who they are before we can advocate for them. But how can you advocate for someone if you don't know them and you don't know their family situation? We realize that most people are homeless because they don't have relationships. It's not so much of giving them a meal, it's more about being their family. And so from our theological standpoint, that's where we are. We're on Main Street. We're right downtown in New Rochelle. Some of y'all may know there's a big master development plan in New Rochelle. We bought that building 14 years ago. They've been trying to move me off that street since I bought the building because we took away the tax base and all that stuff. But we believe that we're the consciousness of the city. We got to be right in Main Street. I got a lot of offers for a lot of money to sell the building. We ain't selling out for Jack or Nate. So we won't be there. And the thing is, we got developers who say, oh yeah, we want to develop your property. We have about 20-something thousand, 40,000 square feet in our building. And they want to move us off and pay us off. And they said, oh, we'll do this for you if you don't do your homeless ministry. And you can stay there, build a new church, but I was like, is this like the preacher's wife or something? Like, it was a trip. And I can't, I'm not Republican or Democrat. I am just a follower of Jesus Christ. That's it. So I'm going to get real with people and say, I don't care, what side you're on, I'm on Jesus' side. So I'm for the homeless and for the helpless and for the lost and for the left out. But it's a big deal. We have to stay where we are. We have to stand our ground where we are, because, for example, churches and organizations, wonderful conferences like this, are not going anywhere. 50 years from now, he's still going to be here. That's right. If you're not here, your grandson's going to be here. My granddaughter's going to be standing right here. That's right. So we got to stand our ground, stand where we are, and build upon that.
Thank you. I was kindly reminded by Tasha that there is a timekeeper right here. Is the timekeeper. So, but the mentally ill. Andre, you mentioned it. Under Governor Cuomo, he has closed mental facilities throughout New York. And as a correction officer, 28 years, I've known that corrections has become the new Arkham Asylum. Right?
Yes, sir. Gotham, brother, the new Gotham.
And where we are more trained in dealing with mentally ill people than the police officers that are on the street, and that's why they keep killing mentally ill people when they respond to issues. But how do we, as elected officials, and deal with these policies? Because the mentally ill, especially because we're poor communities, we're communities of color, we don't have a lot of money. The rich communities, they'll send them off to wherever to get medication and walk on the field and do whatever. But in our communities, they come back home, and we don't. And you said we don't have the resources, but how do we address that on a county level? How do we address that on a state level? Because it's a governor that we vote for foolishly that are closing these institutions.
So I got some of the earliest panel where they talked about politics a little bit, and how we choose our elected officials and how we approach them and what those conversations are like. And quite honestly, that's where the meat and the substance is. So when you if you look at what's happened on the state level the last few years, the Fight for 15, and that became a rallying cry throughout the entire state, Everyone talked about it, and then guess what? Minimum wage started to move. Then everybody in the state started talking about making sure that we do not criminalize our 17-year-olds and that we raise the age. And that became the rallying cry. And it started from the grassroots level. And then guess what? We started to see change at the state level. From a governor that 4, 5, 6 years ago had no desire to talk about these issues. And so now what we're seeing, right, he's talking about our jails and how we treat people in our jail system and bail reform and all of these things. And that's grassroots. That's coming from the bottom. That's a swell, everybody organizing, having the same conversation and moving it forward. The problem is that when we're talking about individuals, as Jasmine, correct? Yes. As Jazz said, we're talking about people that often have no face, that often have no voice, that are often not speaking for themselves. So we need to be that rallying cry. We need to organize. We need to get together, and we need to petition our government and say that this is unacceptable and that work needs to happen for these people. I was on a conference call with my colleagues, and we were talking about our legislative agenda as we move forward. And I was unable to be there in person, and so I wasn't as active in the meeting. And they said, Legislator Johnson, did we get all of your items included? And I said, you didn't mention homeless people, you didn't mention affordable housing, so you didn't mention the issues that I got elected to deal with. And so I know that it is my rallying cry that as we move forward, we will continue to have conversations about making sure that people who work, quite honestly, can afford to live in a community that they have lived in their entire lives. I talked about that one day and I saw the time. Excuse me. There was a woman, I watched them as they got on the bus and were driven to the shelters that they go to. And one woman said to me, I don't want to go to Oasis, which is in New Rochelle. It's too far from my job. Completely changed how I thought about homelessness in that moment. Because you think, oh, there are people at work or whatever. But the woman said to me, it's too far from my job. And right there, you gotta get on the bus, you gotta get to work on time so that you can get paid. But wait, hold on. Once you get paid, you still can't afford your housing? There is a problem with that, and that is completely unacceptable.
Councilman Wells? I'm going to make mine quick, because I know you got some other things. So what I'm going to say right now is to the county legislator, sit next to me. We need some money. And when my county legislator Williams come to you about needing money, I hope you get to vote along with it. So that's how it has to be done, though, because we can, on a local level, as a city councilman, we can ask, but we still need to go to the county. We have to have our county legislators, and we have to talk to them to try to bring us back some of the money and the services. For a long time, we had a Republican there that would not give us anything. And now we have somebody there that we can really count on, you know. Thank God for George Latimer being there. I know we can get the services that we need because he understands the community. He comes from the same community. So when I look at all these particular things that's going on in our communities with the homeless, I understand because we had that conversation.
We're talking about mentally ill.
Yeah, together. No, I'm saying we had that conversation, Chris and I, together about the mentally ill one day when we spoke about all those things. But what we need to do is we have to get resources in there. We have to get dollars. We have to put a facility together other than using the police station, the correction facility, and the regular hospital. Because obviously the cops pick up these homeless people and Dunkin' Donuts and the library, but they take our mentally ill, they take them to the hospital, and all the hospital does is hold them for a couple of minutes and let them go out the back door anyway. So we need facilities that's really dedicated to taking care of this problem and focusing on this issue. You know, because if it's a problem for them, it's a problem for us. You know, and we see it all the time, and I keep on saying the same thing. A lot of people say, okay, there's silent voices, and I heard you say the same thing about silent voices, but silence screams. You ever heard the term of silent screams? Because we see it. You don't always have to hear something. You can see it. And we walk past it every day when we go past people, we see them in the street, and we act like they don't even exist. Not only do we have a problem with taking care of those that have mental issues, we have a problem with ourselves. And we need to start to address ourselves as well as part of the problem. Because when we walk past them down the street and we just act like they're a piece of furniture or another piece of garbage on the street, that is our problem. So if we don't start getting it together and focusing on the bigger issue and making these things happen and taking care of it, I see the time, it's gonna come back to bite us.
I love that you said money was an issue and that we need money, because fundraising is thought raising. When we raise and elevate our thoughts and the way we think about things, we can then present things in a way where it makes sense to people, and then they will want to give money. Right. I have never had a problem getting money, because it comes from creativity and being able to raise the thought level of people. And one of the things that, you spoke to it, is looking at ourselves, but also understanding those, again, hidden illnesses that people don't even know that they have. So when we talk about mental illness, we tend to talk about it as something that's happening out there. But there are tons of personality disorders that we all in this room might be experiencing, and especially in communities of color, there is a strong intergenerational and systemic issues with mental health that haven't been discussed, because, we say take it to Jesus, and, sometimes those are things that we really need to take to a therapist. So, there's a lot that needs to happen, and once we can understand all of the nuances of what it means to have a mental illness, then it won't be a problem that's out there, and then we will advocate for ourselves, because we know that our mental health is important, and then we will bring it to our politicians because it's first priority, because we can't work and live and do things if our mental health is not in order. So self-care is community care.
That's right.
And that was perfect. That's perfect. I say that because, for example, our church, we decided to, just recently, decided to have workshops on mental illness. Because we believe in that each one teach one. Like everybody, I got a cousin, Juju. He's jacked. He's got some jacked. He's got some issues. I don't know if they're mental. I don't know what they are, but it's something. But and I need to know. I'm being silly about it, but I'm serious about it, right? And I need to know. I can help identify and help him. So we all had. These are family members, as far as I'm concerned. I have my youngest, my father. Was the oldest at 10. His youngest brother has terminal cancer. He lived on the streets in Crown Heights. We just got him off the street. Everybody had, no matter how educated I think I am, can't spell a word, but I have to understand that it's part of my family. I also want to say this: we need to be watchful. I worked for the census last 2010. We got to watch Washington. They're about to blow up the census in a bad way. But 2020, we got to count folk. We got on the streets at midnight counting people. They're not going to count people at midnight. That's when you count them. You don't count them. Well, let's look around during the day and not go in the library because they're in the library. Or why not go, wherever they are? And we go under the bridges. You got to do all of that. And we have to advocate for that to happen.
One more thing really quickly. Yes. Suicide is a growing issue in the communities of color, and that is a mental issue. So we need to really frame those things, because then we now have what we need in order to, this is death, this epidemic. We need money. You know what I'm saying? Put it in a way where they can understand it.
Chris, we need money.
People dying,
Chris. In looking back in the 1992 report, they said that it was disturbing to see the low number of black cops within the municipalities of Westchester County. This is 1992, right? Me being in law enforcement for 28 years, the numbers haven't changed, basically, other than Mount Vernon, they go up and down. Mount Vernon is the only police department historically, that will have a black commissioner, right? A lot of police departments, black people don't rise up past lieutenant, but now they got a chief in Mount Vernon, but that's Mount Vernon, right? How do we,
as a community, change that, because the police department is the first entry of our black children when they're racially profiled, when they're killed by police, when they're targeted by police. I mean, this is a national issue. You know, we need to talk about it. So how do we deal on a city level? How do we deal on a county level? And how do we deal on a state level? I don't want powder puff executive orders like the governor did on that independent investigator, because let me tell y'all one thing. The Attorney General can investigate anybody. He don't need an executive order, right? It's in his mission statement. So we got fooled. They use these mothers of these children that got killed by police. They use them because the Attorney General can investigate anybody in the state of New York. He does not need an executive order to investigate police. Now back to the policymakers. How do we fix that? How do we work on that to move forward? Because in changing the police departments, we protect our children.
One thing I think we need to do is, in our schools, we need to better prepare our kids and instill education into them so that they understand the process of becoming a police officer or a firefighter. We don't really do that in our school. And right now, with the police standards, they are raising them up. As they see more and more African Americans come in, though, they start to change the game. That's how the game's always been played. That's how it's going to continue to be played. But what we have to do is we have to educate our youth so that they can have the opportunity and all the tools that they need to be able to apply for these jobs and take these tests and be successful on the tests. So those are some of the steps that we have to look at in our community. And, you know, that's where I would focus at. And I would focus more out on community outreach to make sure that people in our community know about these tests, know about the when are the tests coming up, because a lot of people don't know. So, you know, and it's funny too, because I remember just about 2 months ago, I saw the recruiting signs in Yonkers on something, and I said, wait a second, and I called you up. I said, Yonkers got recruiting signs on the window. They got tests coming up for police officers. How come we never do that in our city? How come nobody knows?
And they advertise in Black Westchester.
And they advertise in Black Westchester where it's going to reach black people. So these are the things we have to focus on to make sure that we hold our cities and our folks accountable to make sure that the proper information gets out there so that everybody knows about these things. Because usually in our communities, nobody ever knows. You know, and by the time they know, they're not prepared. And we need to do something about those test fees on a lot of this stuff too, because some of the folks don't have the money to pay to take the test. So we have to look at that as well. And that I see as just nothing more than a money-making process for the police department and others, because you can make that test free. And it doesn't take that much money or you know, to do the administration of that test. It's the government, they can do it.
I have a lot to say, so I'm going to try to speak very quickly so I can respect everyone's time. This conversation is happening with elected officials across municipalities, across counties. I literally had a conversation with a councilwoman in Albany just a few days ago after talking to a sergeant in the Yonkers Police Department. This is a conversation that we have all the time. I have to give Shonda Rhimes some credit, right? So I was watching How to Get Away with Murder, and the detective, right, he goes into the jail cell to see his father. He goes into the jail, and the father says, "I don't want to talk to you, you pig. Get out of here, you're a traitor." We don't like cops. That's where it starts, right? That's the first problem that we have. We're teaching our children before they have any interaction with a police officer, because when you interact with a police officer, oftentimes, right, it's you arresting baby, or, you know, cousin got thrown on the wall, or somebody got shot, and we're seeing negative perceptions. Unlike a firefighter, right? They either saving your cat, saving your house, or saving your parents, right? So there's a negative connotation already that we have in our families. We need to push past that. Then the test. The test is not speaking to how good you will perform at the job. That's a state thing that we need to go to the state with. We need to have those conversations. Just because you are the best test taker doesn't mean you're going to be a great police officer. And guess what? When your grandfather was a cop and your uncle was a cop and your daddy was a cop and your mom was a cop, you're going to do well on the cop test. That doesn't mean you're going to be a good cop. So that's number 2. And 3, we need to come up with creative solutions. So in Albany, instead of doing the test every 4 years, they're doing the test every 2 years. So you have an opportunity to take the test over and over and place well and higher every time you take the test. A resolution I sponsored in Yonkers asked the state to give extra points on civil service exams to local high school graduates, because white people in Yonkers took all their kids out the public schools and put them in Catholic schools. So guess what? It's not discriminatory. I'm saying I just want to we poured into these students, and these students want to give back to their communities by being police officers. It just so happens that they're all black and brown. That ain't my fault. So if you want your kids to get those points, put them in the Yonkers public schools, and then maybe the schools will be back. There's a whole big thing. But so we need to come up with creative solutions to these issues to make sure that 1, our families are supporting our police departments and our police officers, and 2, the tests make sense to the job, and 3, that we have solutions to make sure that our people do better on these tests and are making sure that we're on an equal playing field with other people.
I was gonna say what he said in regards to no, but it's true. Our children become what they see and admire. And if they don't admire cops, the images that police have in our media, and we don't even have to look very far in the streets, it's not reflective of who they want to be or how they want to be admired in their lives and their purpose. And so, it's like changing what it means to be a police officer, understanding community policing, being able to police in the communities and letting them see those kind of examples as youth, so that when they come into the state form of policing, it has a balance. Right now it's very power over, and I believe that policing should be power with the community. And once that's established, there'll be a difference in the way they see things. So, that's really, how to get people more engaged in that way is, making it something that's attractive. It's not attractive right now. I wouldn't want to be a cop. When I was a little kid, my parents would be driving in the car, they're like, oh, look at Smokey, or every negative name under the book. So I grew up thinking cops were bad guys. I walked by cops, I'm like, so, we have to really fix that.
I'll start by saying that sometimes when black folks become cops, they become more blue than they stay black.
That's right. That's right.
So
amen.
And so there's a challenge. There. We had a protest. Hopefully all of us had protesters across Westchester with all the killings of innocent black bodies, right, black and brown bodies. And so we had one in New Rochelle, and right across the street from our church. We had four of the churches. 3 dropped out. They got scarred because the cop got killed in Brooklyn. And so the city manager, the mayor, chief of police came to my church with all my friends who were pastors, and they were like, "Can you hold off on the prayer rally? You want us to hold off on prayer? Like, really? For real?" And so, long story short, we did it anyway. We let the so-called preachers drop off, and we had the protest anyway. And as a result of that, we were able to get what's called YPI, Youth Police Initiative. Because we did that protest, they asked us, "What do you want us to do?" We said, "Well, we want to do some community policing." And so with YPI, it's a national program. They take the youth from the community, at-risk youth from the community, and pair them up with the police department, with cops. And they stay a whole week together, and they break down barriers and desensitization and all that kind of stuff. And then they get to see that, the good stuff, right? And what we're talking about. And as a result of that, we got some of the kids will be going to, I didn't know much about it, Youth Police Academy. And so now some of them would be interested in becoming policemen in their own community eventually. And to me, that makes a lot of sense. There's another program I want to share with you that we're doing as an after program for the YPI program. It's called, you can look it up, OK program. It's a great program started by a deputy out in California, a black deputy, who now has a program across the country in St. Louis, right where Michael Brown, and what they do is take a cop off the beat, cops off the beat, off the regular beat, and put them in the community. They're from the community, and then they work with the throughout the year, along with it's for black boys, black men from the community, and they mentor them throughout the year, and the police department pays for it.
That's good.
And so, anyway.
Now that we talked about getting young black kids in the police department, right? How do we move on legislation to hold the police accountable? See, because we can have officers of color, but if we don't have officers of conscience, they're just going to go in and fall into the blue culture, and just like brother said, end up beating. Now, I've known black cops that will beat you worse than the white cop to prove that they're part of the system.
Absolutely. That's right.
So, how do we change the system through legislation? From the city level, from the county level, and from the state level. We got bamboozled before, but how do we address this in legislation? All right.
Because these guys are going to tell you how to change it through legislation, and I want to say that systemic issues aren't changed through legislation. You can't force somebody to, like, in that way through law, because they're just going to keep changing the law. So that's my 2, 4, 5, 6, 7 cents.
Well, we made an attempt to change that in Mount Vernon by adding the CCRB, where it's the community is getting involved. So this way we have a board that will hold police accountable, that they have to answer to. So just having that in place is going to eventually make a difference, because when people have these complaints against police officers, they really don't have no place to go. But now, by going to a community, civilian community complaint review board, they have some place to talk to. Because a lot of people don't want to go to the police station because they don't trust the police. And then you don't want to go to the police to complain about the police. Believe me, I know. Trust me, I know.
But Councilman Miles, let me ask you one question. Does this legislation have subpoena power?
Well, that's what we put it in, subpoena power with a lot of teeth, because a lot of it, like even New York City has theirs, but the one that we put together, we definitely put more teeth in there. So this way, if you don't answer, there is going to be consequences for not showing up. And this is giving it a chance for the people from the community to be involved, so that way this information comes out, because a lot of times, I don't know how it happens, but information gets lost in the police station. So I just don't know. It gets lost.
On purpose.
Yeah, but by having a CCRB in place where it's the community that this police officer is coming before to answer these questions about police brutality, about what they have done, how they treated people or mistreated people, that is what's going to make a difference. It's going to be able to help, not only the civilian who had the problem, it'll also help the police, because once you start to get some of these things in place, it'll start to work to help instill the integrity that is missing in a lot of these departments. And that's what we have to put back in. So I think that's what we have to look at. Those are the kind of procedures we have to make. And hopefully it's coming up soon. We'll vote on it and we'll pass that, and the community be involved with that.
And so legislatively, I think that is the biggest thing that can happen. But then I think there's a community piece that the police department needs to understand. There was a meeting in Yonkers 2 years ago, maybe, with the police department, and a question was asked about, discipline for police officers that had, done certain things. And the commissioner first said, oh, well, it's a personnel issue, so we try to keep things quiet. And so that's how the community doesn't trust you. Because now you're trying, it feels like you're hiding something. Whether you are or aren't, whether it is a personnel issue or not, there are issues with trust between people of color and the police, and you cannot break that if you're going to hold information. But the very next thing he said was, one officer was fired, 2 officers were suspended over these infractions. And the room was like, wow, really? A police officer lost their job? And so that right there built some of that trust back. Just saying that, just having people know Because every time I seen a black person shot on video, that police officer gets desk duty, full pay, and then maybe at the end, suspended or something. Eventually in New York City, you could, do bad things with plungers and become lieutenants, I believe. Like, it's crazy what we believe happened. Like, and so unless something like a CCRB has teeth, and then on top of that, that information is being shared, you're not going to build the trust. And if you don't build the trust, we won't get young black people to decide that they want to be police officers, and then we won't get good police officers that look like us, and then the cycle will continue. So it starts there, and then we continue with transparency.
I'll be brief. I'm a bit cynical, so excuse me. I'm not sure we can work with the existing police officers.
Is that in New Rochelle?
In New Rochelle. I'm talking about New Rochelle. I'm not sure. I've had bad experiences, that's all I'm saying. I'm just saying. So, just to be honest, I'm not running for office, never will, so I don't care. I can say whatever I want.
There you go.
I got one boss. So I think when we get our own people from our own communities. It's like we got applications in the fellowship hall. We got a few young brothers who just got or in college, who just finishing college, and they filled out their application to become policemen. We got to follow them.
Right.
That's what we got. We got to have support mechanisms from a community perspective. We got to have support mechanisms for them. Follow them all. Pray for them. Lay hands on them. So they don't lay hands on, you know what I'm saying? So I mean, really, we have to, especially churches, we're not going anywhere.
Come on now,
we're here until Jesus returns, ain't that right?
Come on,
so we gotta be with them the whole way, counseling. We got some brothers that need counseling. I'm telling you, like they don't get it. Right. Wait, let me say something. The police commissioner said this in the meeting. I was right there, sitting one step away from him. He just retired. We were trying to do this OK program for black boys. So they agreed to it. The city manager, everybody agreed to it. And the city manager really runs the show.
Right.
And so we got this program, and now because somebody questioned, well, we need to have Latino boys in this program. And they're pushing. I said, that's wonderful to have. We'll have another program for Latino boys. We'll have them intermingle and do things together. This is for black boys. You already agreed upon it. Why are you trying to back out now? And the old white police commissioner, God bless him, he said, that's right. You know why? Because I'm going to tell you something. Our statistics, we found out 95% of the arrests in New Rochelle last year were black males.
95.
I thought it was like 75. So I went, I'm a cynic. And I was like, wow, 95. That's not just, that's profiling. Come on now, that's straight up racist. That's evil. For us, that's demonic. So, that's right, in New Rochelle.
There you go. Coming to New Rochelle, man.
We got to use that information to cause change.
Yes, I was just getting ready to go to that.
Over here, I normally, this is the only time I know.
This is Karen Edmondson. If it wasn't for her, I wouldn't be doing this stuff. She got me into all this fighting those police and Yonkers.
So these are a few comments. I've been semi-retired. After Damon helped me bring the feds to come into Yonkers to clean up the police department. I will say this, and several things. A, there has to be political will with our elected officials regarding police misconduct. I had to bring in Damon, Minister Mohammed, Arthur, Al Sharpton. I did it by myself as NAACP president. I had to go outside to get strong black men from New York City, black police men to come in and help me. The politicians all whispered behind my back. Nobody wanted to help. But I was tired of complaints, just really, really sick and tired of complaints. Politically, though, I've discovered now at age 52, I did this years ago, we've got a police union. When I started on this journey, Damon and I realized, and he did first, that Yonkers policemen never wore name badges.
They never wore name badges
about that.
until I brought the feds in. So people would complain about the cops and refer to them by their street name, Beavis and Butthead. So they tell you, oh, go file a complaint. Well, you're gonna file a complaint and you have a cop street name, you don't have his real name.
Come on
Well,
now.
do you know what we had to do to get
Come
name
on, help
badges? We were constantly told, this is a police union issue. So this is what I'm gonna hit y'all with. That police union donates a lot of money to elected officials. Tons. Big, fat checks.
Come on.
That police union represents that road cop that beat up Juju or Leroy. Quinn is a brilliant attorney. I was on a caper where a cop body slammed a woman. It was all over the news. Body slammed her. It was evident that she was body slammed. They have the muscle and the might to hire Quinn, who got the cop off. But hear me now. It's all connected. Damon will tell you, we sent complaints to your governor when he was Attorney General.
That's right.
Cuomo. You know what he did with those complaints? He sent them back to Internal Affairs in Yonkers. It's all a network.
Right.
So, when you're voting for Westchester County DA, we have problems with her too. So, all those mini elections you're talking about, they do matter. Especially Schneiderman, as far as I'm concerned, he's useless too. But AG, DA, all those positions do matter. But your elected official, they have to lead the charge. The feds only came into Yonkers because I kept on having rallies. But an elected official could have had a town hall meeting and brought the community in, and they would have had an investigation like that. So it's all networked. All the lawyers are all a part of the club, and you have to pressure your elected official. Do not ignore judges. Oh my God, judges. Yes, the police arrest you. They will. But guess who prosecutes you? The DA. Guess who will set that sentence? The judge. So pay attention to all those, even those mini judge races. Janine Pirro, oh my God, we knew of
Yes, we did.
I don't want to start.
Damon, really quickly, I want to, Damon. I just want to speak to, when we speak about our elected officials and putting pressure on them. Yes, we have to do that in the now. And then we get to also think about the long game. And I spoke about this on in the radio show. We need to start nurturing our youth from now to put them into place. Who's going to be the next governor? Who's going to be the next attorney general? Who's going to be, so that we know, and exactly, so we know, and they're in, like, it's in them, like long term. So then now we've created the society we want to see.
Absolutely. Let me make my comment. And just to make one quick comment on that, I ain't never get no money from the police, and they beat me up. So I think that got to do with me. I'm always in front, and I'm always outspoken for justice for everybody, because it's important. Let me just say this. It's important that we challenge authority. There is nothing wrong with challenging authority, and I do it many times. I get beat up for it, but it's still, something that we have to step up and do all the time. And you guys are right. And what bothers me mostly is that you fight for a community as if you're giving your whole life to it, and you can't get the community and the people you're fighting for to participate or back you up, for the things that they need. And it's important. And, I keep saying it, and going back to just the mental illness, I think at times we're more ill than those that we pass in the street. Because, one, we got to be ill for passing it and thinking it's okay first. Okay, so that just tells me there's something wrong with us. But when you see something that is not right, and you walk past or you don't acknowledge it, you are just as part of it. Your silence grants permission to those who do the things that they do. And you are co-signing that it is all right by you not saying anything. So this is your town, this is your community, this is your city, this is your state. You have to become conscious about what's going on around you, and you have to be a part of it. Because, it can't just be 5 or 6 people. It can't. Every time I go out, I turn on the TV, I see him, you know, him, her, him, him. You know what I mean? Then 5. Her, she stand with me one time because the rest of the elected officials wouldn't stand with me. She called her husband and say, "Listen, everybody ran off on him. Can I stand with him, honey?" But she stood with me on issues that needed to be done in our community that is for us. So we have to start taking that whole thing with the FUBU mind, you know? For us, by us, and take control if we want something to change.
Just quickly, for the purpose of transparency, the Yonkers Police Department gave me $500. But I'll tell you this, and this is important. This is important because why? So they didn't want to touch me during the election. Oh, the head of the union called me anti-police on my Facebook page. And then I won, and now I'm a county legislator. Give me money now. And they wrote a check.
I want to, as editor of Black Westchester, I go to all of these police community forums, criminal justice forums, and all these things. And one thing we talk about when we talk about issues in the black community, we talk about the mental health of the community, but we never talk about the mental health of the police. And from my studies and my research, I think they only take a test, an evaluation in the beginning, and then they don't do. Now their whole career they see murder and rape and all the worst things in the world, and that has to have an effect on them. And we don't never check again for their mental capacity, and they come out and they carry guns and they shoot us. You know, so I mean, that's something we need to bring to the conversation when we have these kind of conversations. That's what I wanted to say.
Can I get my point?
Yeah. Excellent point.
Yeah.
Good evening. I am a police chaplain for the city of Yonkers. I'm one of 4. I carry 24/7 too. I work with the police because I want to change the mindset of the police. As a pastor, morally, you have to get in the game. So I sit at the table with my commissioner and I talk to him about the very same thing that you talked about post-traumatic stress disorder for the law enforcement. Because they come in, they're not reevaluated or assessed over a period of time, and they need to do that. And so those are the things that I sit down and we talk about. We created the Citizens Police Academy for the city of Yonkers. We started it, we created it, we worked with them, YPI. I worked with the Deputy Chief of Navarro for 6 years on that program. The city of Yonkers has not changed since I was I grew up there. We're talking about over, I could probably 50 years. There's 600, and the law enforcement is 630, 40?
Yeah.
Out of 630 or 40, we're talking about maybe 16 now.
It's
I believe.
16 now.
32. Yeah, I'm sorry, 32, and 1 Latino lieutenant.
The numbers haven't changed. Numbers haven't changed. I've been working for 28 years. The numbers haven't changed for 28 years.
And so, my point is this. We're looking to change it, but you got to sit at the table. The other thing is, if you're going to change the way they take the test, you got to change the people who create the test for the individuals to take the test. And so that's what we've been talking about. That's what I've sat at the table with all the commissioners, and we've got to change that, but we got to get people involved to do that. And yes, we got to educate our sons, our daughters. They become law enforcement, change the flavor of the game, and that's what we're working to do as well in Yonkers and so forth. So there's a lot I can say, but what I will say, if you want to change the game, you got to get in that game, and you got to look outside of the box, because of the way they used to do it or doing it is not working. And so what I'm saying is we got to change the whole system, and that's how we got to look at it. The whole system, the people who are appointed, and as well as those who are elected.
Yeah, I like to say.
And one more thing, we talk about the commission now, please, because I'm about ready to blow up about that. I don't even think they know who is being looked for commissioner.
Well, nobody knows. That's nobody knows.
They got to let them know about that
but
too.
I'm saying, as being in law enforcement 28 years, and my wife, I shouldn't be stepping on it. My wife is a detective, and the things that we see out in the street, we need a couple of counselors. I'm just saying, we need some counseling.
Speak for yourself.
All right, this is the last question, and then we're going to close it. Oh, you're the last question. I'm sorry,
It's
sir.
not a question, it's a very quick statement. I am a member of the Westchester Coalition for Police Reform, and we work on several issues, and we're as strong as our membership. One of the things we're very concerned about and trying to work toward is an independent community civilian police review board with subpoena power, with teeth, police community relations. We are a coalition, and I invite everyone to come to our monthly meetings. It's usually the fourth Thursday of every month. This year it's February 22nd, which is a Thursday, at the Slater Center, 6:30. So you're all invited to join us.
Here you go, sir.
Thank you to the panel that's here. And to you, Pastor. Good seeing you today. And we got to come to New Rochelle and deal with that, but I'm being real. Now, you know, when you have a washing machine, I have a question.
No, go ahead.
You have a washing machine.
Yes, sir.
It has a cycle that's the agitative cycle that removes the dirt. Extracts it. And even though you have a detergent, if you take that out, there's no extraction. But the older the machine, the less it extracts. Some of us have been a part of the system so long, we're not extracting anything. We go along to get along. Now, we're tired of that. I'm tired of it. I'm tired of it.
Yes, sir.
The youth are tired of it. I'm in the streets. I have a Peace in the Streets initiative. I walk these streets when everybody else is afraid. I know how to speak in the streets, but I have all the relationship in the streets. We do. So I'm asking us, when is enough going to be enough for us to agitate in these political houses? Because I'm tired of watching us on News 12 go along, yes, and what we want to do today, Speaker, I'm tired of this. See, I'm forbidden to, I got one boss. The Lord of the worlds is mine. The minister said if we want to run for office, lead a ministry. Because politics is shrewd. So I don't want to lead a ministry, so I ain't running for office. But if I was, since you're Levere, this is my question. I would challenge things. I wouldn't care about another term. I would want to strike a blow that the young ones coming, because it's Minister Jazz, and I want you to speak to it. Because if you raise them up, but if they got weak bone, jellyfish spine examples, we raise them up into weakness. So how do we prevent that, and what is it going to take for us to truly deal with a governor who's not been for us? County legislators not for us. What are we going to do with the new one that came in? Sound good.
George, just saying.
So I want to know. That's my question. Agitation. What are we going to do to agitate?
For one, if you know me, I've never went along to get along. That's one thing about me. Two, I never ran to get a job. I ran to do a job. I already got one. Another thing is, I came into play because of the injustice that I see and what the people are paying for, they're not getting. Okay, including myself, because I'm no different than anybody sitting here. I just happen to have a seat that I ran and won because people believe in what I said. And they know what I have always said is what I've always done. And even in Mount Vernon, I got a big fight for term limits because I don't think we should be there that long. So I agree with you about the cycle and the machine being there too long. So that's always been a problem for me because I think you ought to serve and then go home. not to make it a lifelong career and be there for the rest of your life. There's some people that they talk about. I've seen, I was watching CNN one time, and I'm watching them say, hey, if we got to go and bring John, what's his name?
Lewis?
McCain.
John McCain. Yeah, we got to go and get John McCain because he was suffering from cancer, and bring him back for this vote. We will. The man is on a deathbed on the other side of the country. He been there since he got back from Vietnam. When are we going to start to realize that people become complacent? I agree. And you have to become a part of the system. The reason why I want term limits in Mount Vernon and I push for it so hard is because I don't want to be a part of the system. If I ever thought that I was going to be, I had term limits that kick me out and tell me I'm not. So these are the things we have to put in place, you know, and it is very important we start to focus on our youth. That is the most important thing. And set them up behind us. We can set the path, okay? We can set the track. But sometimes you need younger legs to run it to win it. So we just got to set it up. And that's how I look at things.
Yeah, Jazz is going to answer. We're going to close it out.
No, he had a question.
She with me in the back again. We're going to close it out after Jazz.
In 2017, I was a proponent for the Constitutional Convention. This was probably going to be one of the best things that ever happened to us in New York State. But so many people were ill and miseducated about the situation. And my senator, Senator Velmont Montgomery, she is a very old woman right now. And she looked me dead in my eyes and she said, Minister Jazz, but I'm afraid. And I said, well, I am not. Move out of the way. So this is what the problem is. We do have a lot of people that have been serving for so long and they're jaded by the system. They're afraid of what it will do if they do agitate the system. And it really, how many of you guys are under the age of 35? Under the age of 30.
We get the point.
Boom.
Yeah,
I'm glad you got the point. Now, for all of those that are not under that age, how many of you guys know somebody of that age? So we need to be communicating and bringing those people into these spaces with us like it's as if our lives depend on it, because they do depend on it, because those are the future. It is about them, and we are doing a lot of things in policy making without their input, and that's not right. So that's how we need to start agitating them, is bringing in the youth voice. The civil rights movement happened on the backs of college students. It was their energy that made it happen. Yes, you know, Dr. King and all the activists activated their spirit, and that's what we need to turn around and do so that we can get our youth involved.
I agree. And as we close, I want to thank everybody.
I want to hear from my
Oh, brother.
Please.
Yes, sir.
So,
you can close, but
no, absolutely. So, and I have a few constituents here, and Gail talked about how she would text me on the floor, and my relationship with a lot of my colleagues has been contentious because I have been someone who has stood up for what I believed was right, to the point where, you know, the city of Yonkers attorney said, no, don't say that on the floor, you're going to cause us a lawsuit. And I said, so what? This is the right thing to do. However, I will say that there are two sides to that coin. And you talked about the machine cycle and the agitation that causes, but the detergent is important because that's an important part of actually cleaning the system. And so if you don't understand what has to go into the process, you're not going to be able to get through the other side. So I was on the Yonkers City Council. I was in the minority. It's a 7-member board. I was on the side of 3 with 4 Republicans. And so anything that I wanted was automatically blocked. And so I had to play a game to convince my colleagues on the other side, hey, you might want to go along with this thing because it works for you too. Instead of, hey, this is the right thing to do, let's do this now. So there's a balance that has to take place. And I've told a friend or two of mine that going to the county board for me is like going to heaven, because I got 3 colleagues on the board that are black, and so I can act up. And they could be like, what's wrong with that young one? I'd be like, that's okay. They're behaving back there. I'm going to be the troublemaker. So I'm well prepared to do that. And we could just point to the statesmen that the statesman that is Linda Williams and Alfreda Williams and our chairman, Ben Boykin, and I could be the one that acts up. But there's a dichotomy that has to take place. But you have to understand where you are in the system. So my brother may be in a different place than where I am, and I may be in a different place than where Alfreda is. And we need to understand that as a community, so that when we challenge our elected officials, we challenge them from the right place. That we say, and if you don't understand, feel free to ask. And if you can't ask, then they need to go. If you can't ask me why I voted on something, if you can't ask me why I spoke a certain way, if you can't ask me why I voted a certain way, then you need to get rid of me. And if I can't answer your question, because I am there to represent the people that sent me there.
Amen.
Amen.
Yeah.
And I first want to, yes, sir, brother.
You said we have, and I know you're trying to go. I appreciate it.
Yes, sir.
We're going to do more. Yes.
No, but I just wanted to say this for the record. I appreciate it, but I don't accept it. It ain't got to do with you personally.
Fair enough.
I'm going to say this. Pardon me.
That's fair.
Look, man. Somebody got to get tired of the political bullshit. And what I say, my brother, and under you personally, I'm speaking lawful deliberative dialogue. I'm talking to people who hold offices, not to you personally. They do too much of the other side. We know dichotomy. We know makeup. We know what we got to do. But diplomacy is a mask for hypocrisy on the political level. There's too much, well, you know what? We got to do this right here now. This is going to be benefit for you now. Look, I need to get these votes. I need 2 of your votes. No problem. Here's their side. Hey, Muhammad, you got 2 of our votes, but hey, we need you to back us on this other issue over here. And it ain't in favor of your community.
That's how it happens.
But we backed you. Come on now. See, that's the part I'm talking about. Because Dr. Falani left here today, or she spoke to us about homelessness. It ain't just happening in New York.
That's right.
It's happening in Westchester. Huh? We talking about mental health. That episode, I look at every one of them with Shonda Rhimes, because she got a message. The part that I thought you might have went to is that the brother, the father, has a mental issue. And when Annalise saw that, and she was able to get through, then he was able to embrace his son, even though he was still law enforcement. Because anybody against law enforcement, I got family members in law enforcement. I have members of my community deep up in law enforcement. We're not accepting no abuse of no one. I'm sorry, I'm not raising people to love law enforcement who have never atoned for the killing of boys, girls,
Amen.
Husbands, wives,
Amen.
children.
Amen.
And I'm not, if I see someone with a need on any of my children or my people's back of a young girl like Texas,
Oh,
you
God.
gonna tell me to respect law enforcement when your knee is on my girl's back? You have broken the law, and we will break you. And that's what men of God got to stand up and do. And stop hiding behind Jesus. There's a time to put stones down, and there's a time to pick them up and cast them. And people out here are getting tired. And the Honorable Elijah Muhammad said, one day you will see politicians being dragged by their people in D.C. on the back of pickup trucks. It's coming to that point, so I'm trying to warn us.
All right.
Yeah, all right, I'm going. I'm sorry. And I thank you. But I appreciate y'all trying to answer this.
Please forgive me for being such
No, Tasha, you doing your job.
nudge about time. This is a call to action. We are no longer meeting just to hear each other talk and applaud each other.
Thank you, Tasha. Thank you.
So I would like to thank the people who have joined this organization, and we will be here when the panelists get up to take more new membership.
Yes, ma'am.
This is all hands on deck. Everybody put your hands up. Go like this. All hands on deck. We cannot do it in silos anymore. All of these organizations that are here, we need to join together. And we need to hear from you, so we're not making any decisions without you guys at the table. And we're going to start a youth division. We need people that work with youth. We need educators to be a part of this organization. We have to start talking about civics to our babies. I have a 2-year-old granddaughter. She's going to be here.
That's right.
And we have to continue it on. Good for Girls, I'm so glad you're here. So I just wanted to let you guys know, we are going to be here taking memberships. Oh, we have fashion. Awesome. Because we like to look cute. So our t-shirts say Black Votes Matter. We had to shout out Shirley Chisholm, Unbossed and Unbought.
That's right.
Is one of our t-shirts with the Black Power Fist. And then the Westchester Black Political Convention. So on our website, these are available for purchase and gifts. So yes, we are asking for your input. We are taking membership because we need money to make a difference. And we will be here at the end. And thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.
We're closing out in prayer. Let's just bow our heads. Dear Lord, we thank you for this day. What a critical moment in time. We thank you that you've allowed us and called us to be here and purposed us to be here for such a time as this. We know that you have a purpose and plan for this community, for these people who are advocates, and to grow our younger people, get more, as Minister Jazz said, more younger people here, because truly we're doing this for them. And we need their input. Lord, we thank you. Help us to be strong out there. Help us not to hide behind the Jesus of the Da Vinci painting, but stand in front of the Jesus who is subversive and not subservient. Lord, we thank you, Father, for this opportunity to be light in the world and salt in the earth. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. Thank you.
I need